Hey guys, tonight we are revisiting an era where tea service was a solemn rite, exchange of pleasantries was essential for survival, and silence was only permitted if you were occupied with embroidery and maintaining perfect posture. You've accepted employment that fortunately doesn't involve coal dust, surgical operations, or shoveling horse manure. Rather, this role requires a soft-spoken manner, refined gestures, and opinions that remain even more modest. You've taken on the position of a lady's companion, a paid constant presence for the solitary widow from high society, the nervous young lady entering the social scene, or the slightly domineering baroness who needs someone to confirm her belief in the exceptional nature of British preserves. Your everyday responsibilities involve reading passages aloud, performing at the piano, providing approval through nods at exactly the right times, and certainly never winning at cards unless you've been directly instructed to. Before we continue, please think about hitting that like button and subscribing, but only if you truly want to. Also, don't hesitate to mention in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Lower those lights, switch on that fan for some background noise, and let's ease into tonight's little journey. You show up at the home of Lady Eugenia Hawthorne right before afternoon tea is served. Her townhouse carries the scent of floral perfume, lemon pastries, and somewhere faintly beneath, the crisp smell of lavender wax applied to the wooden railings. Her manservant stays quiet as he takes your hat, and you suppress the impulse to bow to a nearby side table out of pure anxiety. Lady Eugenia is already positioned there, poised like a porcelain ornament in a pale ivory chair, so stiffly cushioned it might object if anyone actually attempted to lean back in it. She wears soft grey silk, her hair a perfect white arrangement, and she watches you through glasses that don't enlarge, yet somehow still manage to assess. "Are you capable of playing Schubert?" she asks, without raising her eyes from her embroidery. You acknowledge with a nod. She gestures toward the piano in the corner with a slight movement of two fingers, the way one might signal a hunting hound. The piece is fairly straightforward, more relaxed than you're used to, and she seems unaffected by any small error you commit. Actually, she seems completely disinterested. This, you rapidly understand, is a fundamental aspect of the position. You aren't here to wow anybody, you're here to exist inoffensively. A living, well-educated piece of furnishing that knows when to talk and when to blend into the surroundings. Some days are spent reading passages aloud. This afternoon, it's the poems of Tennyson. You deliver The Lady of Shalott with all the sorrowful grace you can summon while she drinks her tea, and sometimes releases a critical murmur. At one moment she cuts in, noting there's no reason to sound so burdened with grief, dear. It's merely poetry. Then she yawns. You discover that her deceased husband, Major Hawthorne, favoured his cigars imported and his dogs properly trained. She brings him up daily, typically with an inflection that varies between genuine grief and private satisfaction. You nod at the right moments and grin when she criticises his footwear. The most treasured time of the day is the window hour, between 4 and 5. When she takes her rest and you're allowed permission to sit peacefully by the window with your private thoughts and a book she'll never question you about. You consistently select something slightly below your actual reading level, just to be safe if she inquires. You're given one pastry with jam, no butter, and never a refill unless she voluntarily offers it. And yet, there's a strangely soothing stillness in the pattern of this work. The requirement for restraint, the silence cushioned by the flower-printed furnishings, the sound of gently buffed shoes on thick carpeting. What you aren't meant to grasp, but naturally you do, is that some companions were formerly noble daughters themselves, their families having dropped their wealth due to a bad investment or a scandal involving canned seafood from abroad. It's a dignified form of exile. Lady Eugenia never inquires about your history, which serves as both a courtesy and a distinct instruction not to bring it up. You aren't a servant, nor are you kin. You're an interesting in-between, a phantom with a steady income. Still, it beats being a governess. At least nobody demands you teach Latin or punish children using rods. Besides, there are grimmer destinies in Victorian England than getting paid to perform music and reply with, "Yes, Lady Eugenia, I entirely agree." The toughest part? Now and then she gives you a faint smile, and you sense as though you've successfully passed a test you didn't know you were undergoing. The days fall into a deliberate, perfumed rhythm, mornings with the papers delivered still wet with the early fog, and afternoons occupied with literature that must never be too radical, too exotic, or too French. You rapidly learn that even your reading voice matters. One slip into a rural accent, and Lady Eugenia's eyebrow lifts like the Tower Bridge mid-raise. You keep a voice that's neutral, courteous, and not overly enthusiastic. A lady's companion must never overshadow her mistress. Sometimes she has guests, other widows, retired military officers, a remote cousin who smells vaguely of mothballs and defeat. During these occasions, your role is to gracefully fade into the background with poise. You serve the tea, you pass the cookies, and when they talk about the latest war, or the Queen's health, or the cost of imported French wallpaper, you nod without endorsing any specific stance. You aren't entirely invisible, but you're not supposed to draw attention. Obviously, not every lady's companion finds the work so simple. You've heard stories at the lending library. Some companions must share bedrooms with their mistresses. Some are assigned the job of darning stockings or handling grown children who've bombed at matrimony. One woman was reportedly required to play the harp every night while her mistress held séances in the parlour. You, at minimum, only have to endure the occasional poem about country hedgerows. The pay is meagre, scarcely enough for buying new gloves each season, but it includes housing, food, and the dignity of being able to state you have a legitimate profession in a world where an unmarried woman of a certain age could easily tumble into ruin just by being alive. That's a considerable benefit. You once imagined becoming a teacher or a writer or, privately, a theatre actress. But such professions are loaded with social risk, unless your uncle sits in Parliament or your father runs a commercial distillery. Being a companion is the middle path, the secure one, honourable, unobtrusive, tolerable. Every Thursday is devoted to needlework. Lady Eugenia works on an embroidery design. You fake working on the same floral sample for 6 months. She doesn't catch on, or if she does, she endorses your practical laziness. Sometimes, when she's dozing in her seat and you glance up at the clock ticking on the shelf, you wonder who will act as your companion when you become elderly. You picture a younger woman nodding politely as you grumble about modern literature and how nobody makes tea properly anymore. But that's far ahead for now. You stand when the clock chimes 5 and quietly collect your things. You tell her good evening, Lady Eugenia, and she responds with a plain, yes, yes. You may go, as if she'd just registered your existence at all. Outside, the gaslights start to brighten the street. You pass a young chimney sweep with ash on his cheeks, a butcher's apprentice skillfully carrying organ meat wrapped in paper, and 2 policemen too absorbed in discussion to notice the pickpocket swiftly slipping past. You head home in flat shoes and quiet, breathing the combined scents of coal fumes, horse droppings, and the smell of autumn leaves. The streets are bustling again, full of noise and movement and everything your workday doesn't have, and for a quick moment just before you arrive at the boarding house, you catch yourself grinning. Because while the rest of the world turns in filth and intensity, you've carved out your own silent corner, a paid shadow, a required listener, an accepted fixture, a lady's companion. And in Victorian England, that represents more freedom than most ever achieve. The sign hung outside the narrow brick building reads, Dr. Archibald Fenwick, phrenologist, character revealed through the cranium in flaking gold letters. You stand facing it with your gloves held anxiously under one arm, questioning how many absurd declarations you'll need to deliver today to collect your pay. Then you remember you aren't the one being examined, you're the helper, or, depending on the patron, the recognised expert. The Victorian public has an odd appetite for concrete answers about personality, fate, and mental ability, and phrenology conveniently offers exactly that, all wrapped up nicely in a polished ivory replica of the human skull, with neat sections marked for traits like amativeness, determination, and prudence. It's like charting virtue, You step inside and are instantly greeted by the particular smells of chalk powder, pipe smoke, and lemon wood polish. The examination room is crowded with glass jars, real skulls, yes, but also teaching models, charts, and even a shelf holding plaster moulds taken from supposedly notable men. You've been informed one came from a high-ranking priest, and another, whispered discreetly, from a condemned criminal. You've memorized the vocabulary. When a nervous young man asks if he's fit for a position in finance, you gently run your fingers along the bump just above his ear and murmur, "Well-formed acquisitiveness, sir." He grins. Naturally, he's meant for banking. When a mother arrives with her little daughter, bright-eyed, hair carefully styled, behaviour excessively coached, you locate the slightest bumps and announce, "Strong sense of organisation and compassion, ideal for motherhood or piano performance." The mother nods, satisfied and comforted. You never deliver negative assessments. That's Dr. Fenwick's job, if required. He once told a butcher that he displayed moral weakness and shouldn't be trusted alone with young female employees. That particular patron didn't come back. You aim to steer the readings kindly. After all, most people just want affirmation. They want to hear they're naturally good or special, or that their life decisions are warranted. The real talent is in reading the person's character, not the skull shape. Still, there are genuine enthusiasts. Some keep small skull charts in their vest pockets. One old gentleman arrives with his own phrenology measuring tools and demands to double-check your calculations. You let him proceed. Then you quietly tweak his reading to match the life he's already experienced. It isn't exactly lying, but rather strategically directed interpretation. You've mastered keeping a straight face during the stranger inquiries. One man questioned if the bumps on his skull suggested he had the ability to be a writer. Another wanted to learn if he should ask for marriage. A woman once wondered, blushing intensely, if phrenology could determine whether her husband's passion had faded due to his eating habits or a character defect. Dr. Fenwick handled that one himself with a surprisingly extended conversation regarding the consumption of melons at public talks. You're the one who fetches the skulls, manages the charts, and sometimes volunteers to have your own head examined. You rehearse the astonished yet pleased reaction when the doctor announces your exceptional ideality. It's a show, definitely, but so is much of the popular science of the era. And the Victorians, they love a performance dressed up as rational analysis. Your favourite duty of the day is cleaning the ivory skulls in the back room. There's one shaped like a youngster's head, marked with inked labels that are beginning to blur. Destructiveness, hope, secretiveness. You gently clean the grooves with a rag and wonder what sort of individual that head once represented, if anyone at all. You assume some of the models are total inventions, but it doesn't really matter, because in this trade, as in many others, the facts are often less important than the display. There are instances, quiet, ridiculous instances, when you almost buy into it. Like when a well-groomed widow comes in, convinced that her second spouse was prone to unfaithfulness because of an odd bump on the rear of his skull. She sets a small bronze replica on the table, supposedly cast from his actual head. You can't determine if it's genuine or if she commissioned it after the burial out of pure Victorian love for the theatrical. Either way, you nod gravely and touch the particular spot in question, mumbling, "Indeed, a prominent amativeness combined with weak conscientiousness." It may have expressed itself unpredictably. She inhales sharply as if you've channeled his actual ghost. Of course, phrenology has its critics. A few papers dismiss it as simple trickery, and serious medical doctors, those labouring in hospitals deeply involved in real anatomy, tend to ridicule it. But that's mostly unimportant to Dr. Fenwick's clients. They aren't looking for a medical opinion. They're looking for confirmation of identity. And in a culture where people are evaluated by their class, money, and clothing, the idea that one's skull might expose a deeper truth is captivating. Sometimes Dr. Fenwick conducts private sessions for elegant social gatherings. You're told to dress perfectly, hold the shiny calipers, and address everyone as madam or sir. even if they constantly call you boy or girl. In these formal lounges, surrounded by silk and various hors d'oeuvres, you carefully measure the bumps on the heads of society's most bored and anxious people. The strangest request arrives from a couple who want their baby's head assessed for indications of brilliance. The infant is 5 months old, bald, and completely unmoved by your attendance. You softly touch the delicate crown and say something about early awareness. The mother starts crying tears of happiness. The father hands you a coin as a tip. The baby releases a loud burp. There's a shelf in the storage area stacked with outdated phrenology books, with personal notes written in the margins and passages underlined about the relationship between skull structure and moral character. Some of the material makes you uneasy, particularly the sections that suggest certain ethnic groups have lower mental capabilities. You never reference those parts when patrons are present. Dr. Fenwick seems not to care. You suspect that's exactly why he hires you, not because you trust the science, but because you can present the results graciously. You've figured out how to navigate the space between what phrenology technically claims and what people want it to mean. You tell the baker that he has the hands of a genuine craftsman. You inform the school teacher she possesses a highly developed sense of kindness. You once told a man with a frightening glare that he had a hidden sense of humour. He laughed for the first time in what felt like years. And you've never had your own head analysed. You think about it sometimes, but maybe it's wiser not to find out, or better yet, to just act like you know. You can always say your reverence region is unusually prominent, or your secretiveness region is remarkably minimal. Thus, your natural honesty. At the end of each shift, you dust the plaster heads, file the brochures, and question how long the public's interest in skull reading will continue. But for now, it pays the bills, and in Victorian England, that's enough to make faith an optional thing. You walk out onto the gaslit street, holding a notebook under your arm and fixing your gloves. Nobody knows your real opinions, not even your skull. The small back room has a slight smell of bird, not the nice, singing kind, but the dry, musty, somewhat potent smell of feathers long removed from their original owners. You sneeze once more. You're sitting at your little work area, which isn't really a bench, but the edge of a converted dining table covered with spools of thread, small bits of twine, wire frames, and a bird's nest-like pile of colourful plumes. Welcome to your latest occupation, feather duster manufacturing. It's more legitimate than it appears. At least, that's what you keep telling yourself. Feather dusters are essential instruments in every properly kept Victorian home, particularly those with tall ceilings and fancy chandeliers. Every skilled housemaid uses one to brush away coal dust, spiderwebs, and the faint suggestion of poverty. And someone has to be in charge of creating them. You started your training under a Mrs. Godfrey, a harsh woman with stiff leather shoes and hands like chicken bones. She can recognise every feather just by feel. Goose for a soft touch, ostrich for visual drama, rooster for needed strength, and peacock when the buyer wants to feel luxurious. You learn on day one that swan feathers are forbidden, she warns, unless you're prepared for angry complaints from paying customers. The work itself is intricate. You begin by sorting feathers according to their size and shade. Some still cling to bits of their source, requiring you to carefully strip them bare. No buyer desires a duster trailing fuzzy remnants or hints of, well, its origins. After that comes assembly, choosing the exact number of inner, middle and outer plumes to create the proper density. The finest dusters feel thick and luxurious, their stems bound with nearly invisible thread, finished with black velvet wrapping on the grip. A small brass tip completes the handle, occasionally engraved if the buyer possesses particularly refined tastes. These premium pieces go to fashionable neighbourhoods or government officials or some titled lady who keeps a pet monkey and employs a footman. Your early attempts end up in servants' halls, but you're improving steadily. Your palms smell of starch, glue and furniture wax. Your nails hold perpetual traces of powder, and you've developed an unusual awareness of feather sounds. You can now tell if one has split, just by how it glides across your skin. The labour offers tranquility. No shouting clients, no supervisors watching constantly. Just occasional inspections from Mrs. Godfrey, who studies your bundles like a hawk examining a clutch, either nodding wordlessly or dismantling everything with one swift gesture. Start over. The left portion weighs more than the right. Still, there's genuine pleasure in achieving perfect balance, watching goose plumes naturally arch, feeling how rooster shafts provide slightly more tension against the cord. There's something deeply satisfying in converting loose fluff into structured beauty. You once questioned Mrs. Godfrey about her career path? She stopped winding her wire, blinked deliberately, and explained that her mother made decorative parasols. She simply transformed the remaining materials into cleaning tools. The brushes brought superior profits. It wasn't quite the motivational tale you'd anticipated, but it was honest. Several times weekly, a delivery boy from the neighbouring millinery arrives to trade feathers. He perpetually carries hints of perfume and starch. Once, he proposed exchanging a bunch of midnight black ostrich fronds for 3 solid turkey wing quills. You bargained cleverly. You won. The duster you fashioned from those fronds sold the following morning. Mrs. Godfrey offered no comment, but she allowed you to occupy the front workspace that afternoon, nearer the window, nearer to dignity. When your hands ache from binding, you transition to the finishing phase. Each duster receives final trimming, cutting loose strands, levelling the borders so the completed item looks deliberate, consistent and polished, as though it naturally sprouted that way on some impossibly balanced bird. You've developed a personal system. Strike the base twice, spin it once, cut in a circular pattern. This way, regardless of whether the morning brought complete disorder, snarled chicken plumes, a shipment of turkey feathers reeking suspiciously of yesterday's soup, you maintain one corner of your existence in perfect order. Occasionally, prosperous women visit the establishment directly. They address you as girl, regardless of your 25 years, requesting things like, "Do you stock anything in purple ostrich?" Or will this specific tone coordinate with the parlour's soft blue decor? One customer actually brought curtain material to verify matching tones. You raised a bundle of pale violet goose feathers and she remarked, adequate, before settling payment with a small ivory-handled walking stick and leaving. No gratitude expressed, no goodbye offered. But it represented your first personal transaction. Far removed from the servant's wing, you preserved the paper slip in your apron for 7 days before finally releasing it. The establishment itself lacks elegance. A slim display window, a hand-painted sign reading simply "Featherwares" in deteriorating script. But step inside, and it becomes a sanctuary of delicacy. Ceiling hooks draped with demonstration dusters, clusters of plumes suspended like floral displays, bins of sorted feathers tied with rough twine. It's quieter than the textile workshops, warmer than the forge, and considerably more pleasant than the adhesive manufacturers down the lane, where you once saw a worker's shoe, partially dissolving into the ground. You've recently begun improvising. A miniature duster constructed purely from pheasant plumes, another featuring a patterned grip made from wound silk cord. Mrs. Godfrey lifts one questioning eyebrow at your inventive flourishes, but she hasn't prohibited them. Not so far. One afternoon, a gentleman possessing manicured hands and a gentle manner enters requesting a duster for gifting purposes. Something distinctive, something elegant. You present your pheasant design and he grins. "I'll take it," he declares. "My sister absolutely adores cleaning." That may or may not represent the truth, but he deposits a silver piece, heavier than expected. This one you carefully hide away, just in case, and then arrive the more unusual clients. One duster, constructed from crimson-tipped rooster plumes, gets purchased by a stage illusionist. He insists he employs it to clear smoke. Another ships by post to a playhouse in Manchester, destined for a burlesque artist called Lulu La Plume. You don't probe further, but you definitely grin wider while wrapping that package. You gradually understand that your creations journey to locations you'll never experience. You picture your dusters lightly sweeping marble ledges, theatre drapes, velvet ottomans, and the occasional forbidden chamber. It's oddly comforting because, although your name says anonymous, your handiwork circulates through existence like a murmur. Soft, graceful, necessary. And someday, decades ahead, some different young woman might grasp one of your dusters and sense, even briefly, that the world contains gentleness. Even in Victorian Britain, the first principle you absorb is never to dismiss a soggy wool coat, especially when it's draped across your back, still drenched from 7 days of mist, and you're supposed to lift it onto the wooden cylinder without soaking the remaining clean goods. You are currently a mangle operator, a breathing lever, a human pulley arrangement, a domestic technician with forearms resembling braided cable. It's not prestigious, and it's definitely not sanitary, but the wages exceed scrubbing tiles, and you're not obligated to maintain pleasant conversation during labour. The mangle device itself is colossal, an imposing construction of cast metal and timber. It appears capable of crushing a wagon wheel if properly motivated. 2 enormous rollers sit in parallel, turned by a substantial hand lever. Your responsibility is guiding sopping wet linens, shirts, underclothes, petticoats, and whatever the week's laundering produced through the cylinders smoothly, without creases, without bunching, and without trapping your digits. There's a particular tempo to it. Hoist, insert, turn, retrieve. The lever mechanism weighs more than appearances suggest, and the rollers produce a faint screech, perpetually slightly mismatched, right before they catch a resistant corner of heavy flannel. Your workspace is a collective washing facility located behind a series of labourers' homes. It's heated from the boiler in winter, sticky in summer, and constantly filled with chatter. Most of the other mangle workers are your seniors. Some are widows. A few are simply reserved people who prefer forcibly extracting water from fabric to creating problems. Every Monday brings chaos. Washing arrives in enormous weighted containers carrying scents of soap, ash, and human existence. You accept whatever gets delivered, check it for forgotten pins, and start turning. Tuesday brings relief. That's when you reprocess the pieces that got folded while damp or pressed sloppily. The woman 2 positions over once tried mangling a waterproofed canvas apron and nearly snapped the crank. You've never let her live that down. There's contentment in executing the work properly. You can recognise a skilled mangle operator by her stance, legs separated, arms loose, torso positioned precisely. It's a calculated dance with equipment, and if you're competent, the garments emerge flatter than an aristocrat's polished deception. A thorough pressing means less burning for the girls at the ironing board, fewer complaints from those who hire us, and, if luck permits, a few pennies hidden in the folds of next week's fresh delivery. Sometimes the items received are strange. A corset of delicate lace marked deeply with burgundy wine, a cotton handkerchief bearing initials that don't correspond with the enclosed list. You remember ruining silk breeches once, material so thin it nearly floated straight off the cylinder. You stayed quiet. Every worker stayed quiet. The washing room held its collective breath, then released a wave of anxious giggles. But the work is brutal. Your spine stiffens before the noon chime. Your joints start swelling visibly by Friday's arrival. The skin on your palms becomes thick, marked, and frequently carries the subtle, bitter scent of harsh lye. Yet the authority is yours, your raw strength, your rhythm, the spinning of your personal lever. And in a city where women are frequently reduced to decoration or complete dependency, being required for physical power feels strangely empowering. Though your identity will never be embroidered into any elegant garment, your contribution is present. They feel it, pressed flat into every neckband, every bedsheet, every crisp fold. By Wednesday, a particular pulsing ache develops in your limbs that registers as both punishment and achievement. The steady discomfort proves you've survived this deep into the week. It also warns that 2 more complete days remain before you can finally rest in silence without the phantom spinning of the cylinders echoing in your skull. The mangle apparatus, obviously, possesses its own personality. Yours tilts noticeably toward the left. The lever will lock up if you hesitate too long between forceful rotations. It releases a low moan on days when the atmosphere is thick with dampness. And once, just once, it ejected a gentleman's formal trousers with such surprising force that they landed perfectly in someone's midday stew in the courtyard beyond. Mrs. Callahan never allowed you to forget that incident. You've become fiercely protective of your machine. When the supervisor suggests lubricating the metal cylinders, you mutter a warning, not excessively, beneath your voice. Too much oil and the delicate fabrics slip incorrectly. Insufficient, and your shoulder will dislocate painfully again, just like previous spring. The other women maintain their habits. Rosie hums old hymns to preserve her pace. Agatha talks to the mangle as though it were her missing third spouse. Unreliable, noisy, but trustworthy enough when properly maintained. Someone even etched a crude, simple face into the wooden lever years back. 2 tiny circular eyes and 1 straight mouth mark. You've worn the carving smooth with all the years of constant handling. Sometimes you fantasize about being replaced completely, not your body, but your essential role. Perhaps a massive steam-driven press, completely automated, incredibly efficient, absolutely quiet. Publications discuss these innovations in the grand washing facilities of the wealthy class. But here, within the working-class streets of Camden, nothing can genuinely substitute the pure power of the human rotating arm. Not currently, anyway. In your most profitable weeks, your income allows modest luxuries. A fresh, narrow roll of crimson ribbon, a ceramic container of rose-fragranced ointment, a second-hand paperback novel with dog-eared pages. You study by dim candlelight, your forearms propped on the chilled stone of the window ledge. You've also gained the capacity to recognize your labor out in the real world. At Sunday worship, when the minister's lengthy white robe appears especially crisp and smooth, you subtly elbow the woman beside you and whisper, "That one is mine." When you encounter the neighborhood baker's spouse and notice her apron lying absolutely flat against her belly, a brief surge of silent satisfaction flares within you. Nobody ever celebrates a perfectly smoothed bedsheet, yet it exists, quietly maintaining the overall appearance of proper civilization. Pressed fabric, impeccable stitching, the inherent respectability of cleanliness, all depending on the steady, quiet spinning of your own 2 arms. Your mother always claimed that to fold laundry was, fundamentally, to fold respectability. Only now do you completely understand her wisdom. And then there are the hushed tales that come concealed within the week's wash. You discover handwritten messages stitched into waistlines, mysterious coded correspondence, initials embroidered over a tiny scrap of verse tucked deliberately inside a cherished blouse, and once, almost incredibly, a delicate pressed violet blossom between 2 thick petticoats, its natural hue barely diminished. You never pose questions, but you always retain the information, and so you persist turning the heavy lever, not for applause, not for acknowledgement, but because somewhere in this metropolis a person will wear a freshly flattened collar tomorrow dawn, boldly step into their existence and feel slightly more polished, never realizing that it was you who made it possible. In this damp city of gas vapor, black coal dust, and perpetual human perspiration, you are the silent guardian of clean edges. And the world, regardless of its disorder, absolutely needs clean edges. The atmosphere inside the workshop is thick with rising steam and the subtle, recognizable smell of scorched animal fur. Nearby, a large kettle starts to whistle sharply. Elsewhere, someone mutters angrily as a burst of scalding vapor releases too rapidly and scalds an exposed palm. You position yourself at a huge wooden surface in a cramped room that resembles more a steaming bath than a design workshop, surrounded by overflowing shelves stacked with raw felt, straw foundations, silk bands, and rounded wooden forms. Today, like every other day, you are the assigned hat blocker. If a hat represents the essential crown of the respectable Victorian gentleman, then you are the person who guarantees that this crown never droops, leans awkwardly, or makes its possessor resemble a melted formless cheese. Your instruments are simple, but carry a sense of tremendous history. A large kettle, a cushioned hammer, polished wooden blocks shaped for every conceivable skull, a lengthy fabric measuring ribbon, a set of leather gloves, thick, weathered hands, and the infinite patience of a spiritual follower. The process must always begin with steam, nothing except steam. You position the raw, entirely shapeless felt fabric directly over the kettle's opening until it surrenders into complete compliance. It becomes utterly limp, like moist bread mixture. That is the crucial instant you must pull it, swiftly but uniformly, over the designated wooden block that corresponds with the customer's skull measurement and selected design. Top hat, sturdy bowler, the traditional Homburg, or maybe the unusual angled trilby. You stretch the material firmly, like flesh pulled over skeleton. You tap it carefully into the necessary form. Then you secure it with pins, tie it firmly, and allow it to dry completely, gradually hardening into its final designated character. You have witnessed at minimum 1,000 hats move through your working palms, yet no two ever appear exactly alike. Some lean forward, appearing hostile. Others slope backward, holding a subtle suggestion of playfulness. The hat constitutes the final crucial disguise a man wears before facing the outside world, and you are its quiet, invisible artisan. You once formed a hat for a legislator whose skull was so absolutely round that you had to measure it twice to be totally confident. Another occasion, an ambitious young performer demanded a top hat that contained a mild trace of wickedness. You gave the hat's peak a very delicate forward tilt. He provided you a free ticket to his upcoming theatrical show. Then there was the strange gentleman who firmly demanded his hat required being just a tiny fraction taller than his known competitors. You added that precise half-inch and never revealed your technique. Some days you are simply trusted with the vital responsibility of restoration rather than the initial forming. That is when the genuine challenges emerge. How does one effectively repair a crush-damaged hat from a careless, intoxicated opera departure? How do you manage to salvage a solid bowler abandoned carelessly too near an open fireplace? You smooth out the severe wrinkles, delicately mend the damaged inner fabric, energetically buff the exterior ribbon, and restore it appearing superior than it ever looked when fresh. There is an unusual, silent satisfaction in remaining invisible in this trade. If your work is genuinely excellent, nobody ever notices. The hat simply fits perfectly. It blends into the wearer's outline, his determined walk, his essential social protection. But, when the work is executed badly, you've listened to the warning stories. One error in blocking and a man's whole standing is transformed. Too brief a hat peak and he is immediately ridiculed as a backward country farmer. Too broad a rim and he is permanently branded as garish or crude. You shoulder that serious weight every time you grasp for the steaming kettle. Your work covering is now permanently marked with human perspiration and black pigment. The flesh on your thumbs is exceptionally hardened from constant pinning, but your trained eye stays sharp. You can observe a stranger across a busy street and instantly determine his skull size, his favoured design, and, if you choose to be bold, his precise marriage status, purely from the general state of his headgear. It is much more than simple millinery, it is silent storytelling, and by the centre of the week, you are expert in it. Your palms recall the form of every individual block they have contacted. Polished domes of cedar, sharply defined brims, and the rare custom form featuring an unusual bump near the ear. possibly from an old wound, a childhood tumbling accident, or a lifetime wearing hats that were far too constricting. You have trained yourself to preserve these details, though not recorded on paper. You remember the man with the sour breath and the silk gloves who desperately needed a hat that would inspire authority but never aggressively demand. You supplied him with a bowler that had a very solid crease and a rim that was just shy of appearing conceited. You remember the playhouse director whose top hat was regrettably deformed at the peak because he kept it beneath a dripping overhead window. You carefully fixed it twice before understanding he actually preferred the flaw, naming it intentional distress. And then there is the one you realise you will never dismiss. A tall, very gentle-spoken gentleman who arrived with a thoroughly destroyed straw boater and an official-looking message folded into his jacket pocket. He communicated very sparingly, but you immediately sensed the hat had belonged to another person, someone now completely gone. You did not pose a single inquiry. You simply reshaped the straw fresh, gently smoothing the rim, steaming it softly, and wrapping the exterior ribbon in respectful black fabric. He compensated you in total silence, departed with only a brief, courteous nod. There are intensely private narratives tucked into every sweatband, every hat that is formed within this chamber and has a purpose to fulfill. Ceremonies, lengthy funerals, professional advancements, secret affairs, formal confrontations, society introductions, permanent vanishings. You never actually witness what ultimate result occurs afterward. You simply dispatch the hat forward, like a firmly sealed letter, and trust the intended meaning is properly understood. You work with felt and steam, shaping desire into something people can actually wear on their heads. The requests make no logical sense half the time. I need respectability, but not too much of it. Or, give me a hat that makes people think I've always belonged, even if I never say a word. You do your best to translate these impossible wants. A slightly different angle, a sharper fold in the fabric, a shade of grey that's just a bit deeper. You figured out pretty quickly that men can't really explain what they want, but they absolutely know it when they see it sitting on their own skull. The mirror tells you everything, and there's always that one perfect moment, the small tilt of the chin, the quick adjustment of the brim, the quiet exhale of complete satisfaction when they look at themselves and fully believe the story you've woven for them out of nothing but felt and hot steam. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it feels exactly like standing ovation. You've made hats for powerful judges, neighbourhood bartenders, weathered sailors, and anxious schoolboys, for secret lovers desperate to impress, for criminals trying to look legitimate, for men who want to completely vanish, and for others who need to be impossible to forget. Nobody ever remembers you naturally, but sometimes when you're walking down the street and you spot a specific hat that sits just right, shaped perfectly, exact and confident, you can't stop yourself from smiling just a little. That particular hat came from your hands, and even though your actual name isn't stitched into the fabric, your specific, quiet influence remains, lasting in a city that only cares about surface impressions. You create the essential crown they display, and yet nobody ever thinks to acknowledge the steady hand working invisibly behind the brim. You begin every single night with a tall ladder, a controlled flame, and a frantic race against approaching darkness. The gas lamps won't wait for anyone. The second the sun finally disappears behind the uneven chimney stack rooftops of London, the entire city starts to dissolve into heavy soot and expanding shadow. That's your signal to move. You lift the long pole, wrap your scarf tight, and begin your familiar path. You're a humble lantern lighter, not the type who works inside elegant hotel lobbies with shiny brass buttons and a practiced smile. No, you're outside on the cold, brutal streets, cobbled, usually damp, and frequently quietly dangerous. Your job is deceptively straightforward: to manually light each of the city's numerous gas lamps before complete night falls, then return again at first light of dawn to carefully put them out. straightforward until it rapidly stops being that. Each gas lamp is dangerously positioned on top of a tall iron post roughly 10 feet above the ground. You carry a pole that has a small, controlled flame at the very end, fueled by lamp oil and pure determination, and you use it to reach upward, push the small lever trigger, and ignite the gas mantle with a burst of fire. It flares softly right away, a warm, pulsing blue circle expanding inside the glass globe. Then you need to move quickly. There are endless lamps to light before the world is completely dark. You walk incredibly fast. The route is an unchangeable pattern. Baker Street, around Langham Place, all the way down toward the wet riverside fog. You know every flaw in the paving stones intimately, every spot where the footing changes beneath your boots, every single shortcut through the narrow alleys and hidden mews. The lamps themselves seem to have their own distinct personalities. Some light up quickly in perfect cooperation. Others hiss, sputter, requiring a second careful try. There's one specific lamp on Broadwick Street that always flares way too bright and once almost burned off your eyebrow. You quietly call that one the Dragon. Sometimes children follow behind you, matching your pace, pretending their walking sticks are also burning torches. You allow them, unless they get too close to your feet. Not every interaction is pleasant. Loud drunks sometimes shout. A few street troublemakers once tried to steal your pole to set a tavern sign on fire. You managed to get it back. Eventually they ran away, laughing in the dark, and you silently curse them with every breath. Your grandmother used to curse at the chickens. Still, most people never even see you at all. You provide light for their path, yet they never notice your face. Occasionally you pause just a second longer at the lamps on the corner, looking down at the street below. The glow of the gaslight softens everything. The dirt looks like gold, the smoke seems thinner. Couples walk closer together, and a lady fixes her hatpin using the reflected shine. You're the unstated beginning to every evening in the city. One time, on a cloudless night, you watched a gentleman propose under your lamplight. She said yes. They kissed. Then he looked up and gave you a brief acknowledgement. You returned the gesture. But no, that didn't happen. Every night brings its own challenge. Rain makes the iron steps slippery. Fog makes it harder to find the lamps. Wind tries to extinguish your tiny flame before it can light the gas. On terrible nights, you wake up soaked, bruised, and covered in soot streaks, your arms trembling from holding the long pole too high for too long. But the city is safer, warmer, and more alive when all the lights are burning, and knowing you accomplished that quietly, with no applause, is all you need. Dawn arrives before the sun actually shows up. You're already awake, your scarf damp with dew, your boots still wet from the night before. The street is a faint grey as fog wraps around the buildings. Shop owners yawn as they unlock their doors, and a cat chases something invisible beneath a cart. Now begins the second phase of your job, putting out the lights. You retrace the same route backward, holding the same pole, but instead of carrying fire, now you bring darkness. You raise the hooked end of your tool, press the small lever that cuts off the gas flow, and watch each lamp flicker and die one by one. The city sighs in its sleep as you extinguish the borrowed stars of the night. There's a quiet rhythm to this process, a sense of stillness. Last night, you brought warmth and visibility. This morning, you gently return the city to the daylight, one flame at a time. And yet, despite having done this for years, you still notice the unique beauty of it all. The way a gaslight goes out like a silent breath. How the pigeons don't stir until the fourth lamp on Great Marlborough Street is extinguished. How chimney smoke just begins to drift upward as you reach the halfway point. One morning, you find someone standing beneath a lamp. A young man clutching a leather satchel, nervously checking his pocket watch. "First day at the bank," he whispers, not really speaking to you. You nod, extinguish the flame, and say, "Good light." speaking to yourself. He looks surprised, smiles, and then disappears into the mist. You sometimes wonder if the lamps remember you. Probably not, but there are marks, small scratches on the poles left by your hook, the subtle layer of soot on your gloves that only you can distinguish from week to week. This is your hidden mark across the city, your signature. Of course, technology advances for everyone. There's talk of electric lights now, arcs of current, metal filaments, and glass bulbs. Some streets have already been converted. Your friend Thomas, who used to cover the east side, lost his entire area when they installed the new wiring. Now he sells matches from a box on Oxford Street. You haven't said it out loud, but you understand. One day your ladder will stay in the corner, your pole will collect dust, and the lamps will shine without your effort. But for today, this morning, you're still needed. You turn the last corner, reach the final lamp, and lift your pole one last time. The small flame inside trembles once, as if knowing the day has arrived. Then it disappears. The silence is profound. You lower the pole, rest it against your shoulder, and in the stillness, between extinguishing the lights and the waking world, you absorb the quiet, strange dignity of your labour. Not every job allows you to push back the darkness, but yours does. Twice each day. It's not even dawn yet, but you're already moving through narrow passageways where the cobblestones are still damp from the night's moisture. Past houses where curtains shift with the breath of sleepers who rely on you more than they realise. In one hand you carry a long, thin stick, in the other a pocket watch ticking like a steady heartbeat. You're a knocker-up, and your purpose is to wake the town. Not with ringing alarms, not with crowing roosters, and definitely not with clocks. Those are expensive, unreliable things reserved for financiers and lawyers. No. You wake people in the traditional way with a gentle tap on the window glass. Or, if you want to be playful, a pea shooter aimed directly at the pane. You carry a mental list of locations, names and times. Mr. Collings, at 4:45 a.m. exactly for his shift at the metalworks. The Stevens twins at 5:10 for the bakery. Mrs. Kettering at 5:55 because she needs exactly 15 minutes to fasten her boots. No more, no less. You approach each building like a ghost. Lift your pole and tap, tap, tap at the third-floor window just under the left shutter. Sometimes they wave. Sometimes they grumble. One time, Mr. Collings went back to sleep and blamed you for his tardiness. You tap twice as hard the next day, louder. It's a quiet job and surprisingly delicate. Too soft and they'll sleep through it. Too loud and you risk waking the infant, or worse, the landlord. Some windows have tricky spots that don't carry sound well. Others are blocked by thick drapes. One woman installed lace so heavy you had to resort to tapping the drain pipe instead. And the pea shooter. It's not a toy, it's a strategic instrument. You learned that after the family on the 7th floor moved in on Pudding Lane. No ladder in the world could reach that high. So now you carry a small bag of dried peas. Clean, reusable, and surprisingly effective. You've developed an excellent aim. Your job makes you invisible during the daytime. No one notices you by noon. They simply forget. They assume they woke naturally, by habit or coincidence or some inner sense of duty. But it was you. It has always been you. Once a man tried to invent a system of ropes and pulleys to replace your service. It became tangled. A cat got stuck in the mechanism. You were back on the route the very next morning. Your footwear wears out faster than anything else you own. The soles become thin from the constant miles. You tried wearing boots once, but they made too much noise on the stone streets. Now you wear soft-soled shoes and carry a pencil to write down any new requests. Knock on the frame, not the glass. Or add 5 minutes on Fridays. It's not glamorous, but it's important, because you're not just waking people up. You're fulfilling commitments. Commitments to pastry chefs, butchers, clerks, and chimney sweeps. Commitments whispered in exhausted voices the night before. Get me up no matter what. And you do. Your route winds through a significant part of the early morning world. You know which homes creak before their occupants do, which windows fog up from kettles just starting to heat, and which doors will open exactly 3 seconds after your knock, as if they were expecting it in their sleep. You never stop, never exchange small talk. That's not part of the deal. A proper knocker-up is a subtle sound, not a lengthy conversation. Still, there are exceptions, like the young trainee on Barley Row who leaves you a baked good on Tuesdays, always wrapped in paper, always still warm. He never says a word, but the biscuit always has one raisin, like a personal signature. Or the coal delivery man who once invited you in for tea during a snowstorm. His hands were black up to his elbows and the tea was strong enough to wake the dead, but it warmed your body and your sense of purpose. Then there's the couple in the corner building, the retired pair. They have no jobs to attend, but every morning, just before 6, you tap their window anyway. And every morning the curtain moves and a hand waves. Out of habit, out of gratitude, out of something deeper than alarm clocks. The city has a distinct pulse at this hour. Market wagons roll into position. Glass milk bottles clink together. Doors creak open like reluctant eyes. You pass a lamplighter heading the opposite direction, giving a nod of mutual respect. You both belong to the invisible workforce, guardians of transitions, masters of the boundaries. One morning a girl stops you mid-route, maybe 12 years old, her hair in braids. "Are you the one who wakes my father?" she asks. You nod your head. She stares for a moment, then says, "Thank you." Just that. Then she runs off into the fog. You find yourself smiling for the rest of your route, even as the cold penetrates your coat and the air stings your throat. The work is isolating, but not without appreciation. Sometimes the task changes. You receive a request to wake someone at 4 a.m. for an early train. Another man asks for 7:05 exactly. Not a minute sooner, not a second later. You meet all their requirements. You adjust. You become a walking timepiece, more accurate than any brass mechanism ticking on a mantle. And you never, ever sleep late, because who wakes the knocker up? You do, with a backup method, a candle left burning, a teapot that boils dry if you're late, or maybe just the weight of the city itself pressing on your shoulders, whispering, "Wake up." They're waiting now. The world will probably move toward automated timekeeping eventually. Factories installing loud whistles, train stations ringing bells. But for the moment, the city still needs you. Not because you're loud, but because you're reliable. Because you remember every name, every time, every window that opens, exactly as requested. You're the city's first whisper each morning, and in the moments before history is recorded, you're the one who starts the day. The smell hits you before anything else, an intense, swirling combination of peppermint sagebrush, dried rose petals, and something sharper like crushed pennyroyal on a stone floor. It clings to your dress, your hands, even your money pouch, and to you it smells like your income. You're a herb woman, not a medical professional, not a mystic, certainly not a pharmacist, although some might whisper that last word with caution. You're something much older than any of those, part seller of remedies, part mobile pharmacy, part neighbourhood fortune teller with a woven basket on your arm and a complete botanical garden in your mind. At dawn, you arrange your merchandise, dried bunches tied with string, small fabric bags of powder, glass bottles of liquid extract tightly sealed with wax. Everything is labelled in your handwriting, though most of your customers can't read them anyway. You begin your circuit through the small alleys and courtyards, calling out in a voice that's part song, part invitation. Lavender for peaceful sleep, thyme for breathing problems, rosemary for melancholy. Children peek out from behind curtains. Housewives wipe their hands on their aprons and step out onto the street. Men who pretend to doubt your products find reasons to buy just a small piece or two for their wife. You instinctively know who needs what. You don't always say it directly. You hand the baker's wife a bunch of marjoram and tell her it helps with insomnia. You don't mention that you heard her crying through the open window last night. For the apprentice grocer, it's comfrey root for that persistent cough you state, even though he insists it's nothing serious. You notice the spots on his shirt. You walk past the church, but you don't go inside. The priest gave you a look once that suggested he'd prefer you didn't enter. That's perfectly fine. You don't need altars. You have stinging nettles which burn sharply enough to remind anyone that they're still alive. Some days the market vendors look at you as competition. Other days they offer you friendly acknowledgement. The woman selling flowers once gave you half a box of damaged blooms for your fragrant sachets. You gave her a small jar of healing salve in return that fixed her chapped winter hands. She never forgets your name now. Your remedies aren't guaranteed to work. You know that feverfew doesn't always relieve severe headaches. Not every boiled root can mend a broken heart. But you've observed enough to trust in predictable connections. Chamomile and patience, licorice and deep breathing, sage and strength. And sometimes faith itself is a component of the healing process. There are places where you're always warmly received. The lodging house where the owner lost 3 children, now filled with your lavender bundles. The tailor shop where a small pot of mint grows on the windowsill in an old teacup you gifted her. The bricklayer's lane where your balm is passed around like a treasure during the cold weather season. And there are residences where you only knock once, gently, and leave what's necessary without speaking. You're not wealthy, nor will you ever be. Your boots are worn through at the heel and your coat is patched so often it's essentially a tapestry of repairs. But your fingers know the texture of crushed valerian root better than any metal coin. Your nose can distinguish between genuine chamomile and the cheap substitute in less than a second. And when someone calls you a healer in the same affectionate tone they once used for your grandmother, you feel satisfied. Because in a city overwhelmed by smog and steel, you remain something green. By the middle of the day your basket is lighter, but the city seems heavier. The thick fog has settled low, clinging to the paving stones, and the horses' hooves splash in puddles that smell more like industry than rain. You tighten your shawl around your shoulders and turn into the small yard behind the metalworker's shop, where Mrs. Drayton is waiting for you. She doesn't greet you. She simply opens the door and signals for you to step inside. Her daughter is sick again. Anxiety. The doctor says she's stopped eating, sleeps only in short bursts. They gave her an opium-based medicine, but it makes her see shadows. You reach into your basket without speaking and take out 2 items. A thin cloth pouch filled with crushed hops, dry roses and lemon balm for placing under the pillow, and a glass bottle of your personal mixture. Chamomile, skullcap, valerian, and just the faintest hint of clove. It's not magic, you remind her. It's comfort. It's soothing warmth. It's something reliable that wasn't manufactured by a stranger in a formal white jacket. Mrs. Drayton presses coins into your hand and says, "Thank you. Thank you," as if it's the only complete sentence she's capable of saying out loud. Later, you walk past a row of wealthy homes where no one buys your items. They have their own medical professionals, respectable pharmacists with high collars and polished silver tools. Still, you glance toward their windows. You wonder what's growing in their ornamental gardens, if they realise the ivy climbing their stone walls can be used to relieve congestion or, depending on who you ask, irritate the skin. Once a servant girl secretly came out to buy raspberry leaf tea for her sibling. You never saw her again. You still think of her when you walk past that particular door. You know which plants provide healing. You also know which ones don't. Not all of your work involves pleasant smells and gentle salves. There are more dangerous roots in your bag. Foxglove for hearts that beat too fast. Pennyroyal for the types of sensitive issues that are only discussed in hushed tones behind closed doors. You never sell these to just anyone, but you do keep them, not for causing harm, but for offering choice. You've witnessed enough to know that recovery in Victorian Britain is rarely straightforward. Never easy, and often withheld from those who need it the most. As the light begins to fade, you head back to your flat. One room, 4th floor, south-facing window, where you hang herbs on strings like decorative flags. The air inside smells of marigolds and old books. You light a candle, pour steaming water over fennel and mint, and soak your tired feet in a basin of rosemary water. Tomorrow the routine starts again. New aches, new individuals, new hands, reaching for help they're too proud to request. But for now, you rest, you drink your tea, and you remind yourself. In a world where so much is grime and quiet indifference, your hands still possess the skill to encourage green life from the soil. You're not some miracle maker, you're not a con artist, you're a herb woman, and with the proper timing in the proper household in the proper moment, that's completely enough. The opening notes of the melody drift forward like a whisper, rich, unhurried, and faintly off-key. You turn the hand crank a bit further and the sound becomes sharper, clearer, transforming into a spirited dance number. The cobblestone street responds as it always has. A few heads swivel, a child tugs at a parent's arm. Someone peers out from behind a window shade on the upper level. You're a street organ grinder, which means you create music through metal pieces and spinning mechanisms. Mechanisms, not the delicate motion of fingers and strings. Your organ isn't fancy. It's a hand-cranked wooden container roughly the dimensions of a compact cabinet mounted on a wheeled platform. You roll it from one city corner to another. Inside are multiple rotating cylinders fitted with tiny pins that strike small tuned metal teeth. As the crank is turned, it groans, it rattles, it produces a tune, but most critically, it draws a crowd. You pause at the intersection of Rosewood Lane and Bow Street, right outside the tavern, where the windows fog up by midday and the sounds of merriment come before the beer being poured. You don't need sheet music, just tempo, recognition, a touch of style. You begin the morning with a cheerful number. Rule Britannia or Daisy Bell, something the elderly ladies will sing softly and the youngsters will move along to. And then, naturally, there's your assistant. He's not technically your possession, but he shows up every morning reliably, wearing his tiny red coat and matching small hat. His name is Toby. He's a little monkey and he's the real reason people toss coins into your collecting cup. Toby is remarkably well trained. He bows, he tips his hat. He extends a small brass container and collects money like a skilled panhandler with far better etiquette. Children squeal with happiness. Men offer a grin despite themselves, and women, even those who mutter that street music is vulgar, nearly always give Toby a little coin. You trained him yourself back when you struggled to pay for his meals. He used to attempt to swallow the coins. Now he examines each one like a bank clerk, then places it into the box behind the instrument wheel. There are dangers involved, naturally. Street organ grinders aren't universally welcomed. Some people view you as a source of racket, a type of obstruction, or even worse, an outsider. Many grinders are newcomers, and the accent you carry, Italian, Irish, Polish, affects how people respond to you. Some merchants shout at you. One fellow once threw filthy water at Toby. You stayed away from that particular corner for multiple weeks, but on most days you're welcomed. Like a wandering tune, you understand your audience. When the factory labourers take their break period, you change to emotional songs, slow and tender. When the neighbourhood boys assemble, you play something bold and fast, the internal drums pounding, the tempo brisk. And when the sun sinks low and the streets begin to shimmer with an amber colour, you always finish with a tune that's slightly melancholy. Toby is perched on your shoulder by then, tired from the extended day. The music lingers in the street long after you've departed. Sometimes you'll hear a fellow humming your closing tune, or a young girl singing your melody as she hops down the pavement. You grin, though they never glance up. You're not a performer in a grand hall. Your name isn't displayed on any advertising posters, but you're definitely heard. And in a city where most people walk with their eyes downward, You make them look up. The streets begin to shift as the evening approaches. The butcher drags in his large sign. The lamplighter passes by, acknowledging as he lifts his small flame. You keep playing one final song for the labourers heading to their homes. Their heavy boots scrape on the stone with a rhythm your organ nearly matches. Toby is nestled on the rim of the cart now, sleepy but watchful, his small eyes half shut. He's had a solid day. His little container is weighted with copper coins, and someone even tossed in a small piece of sugar wrapped in paper. He sniffed it, tasted it briefly, and decided it was worth keeping. As you finish your final song, an old sailor's melody whose name you've mostly forgotten, you dab your forehead with a small cloth and engage the locking mechanism on the wheel. The air carries the scent of coal smoke, cooking onions, and something sweet from the nearby bakery. You let yourself imagine having a warm pastry for supper tonight. Not just plain bread, a genuine pastry. You've earned it. Because being a street organ grinder isn't just about turning a crank. It's about knowing precisely when to turn it, where to station yourself, how to read a forming crowd, when to start loudly, and when to let the music dissolve like smoke into the small spaces between people's rushed steps. Once a police officer questioned if you had a permit. You did, barely readable but legally stamped. He still regarded you as if you'd stolen your cart. That evening, you played God Save the Queen outside the station until he emerged and requested you politely to stop. You smiled, Toby bowed, and you moved along. There's a hierarchy among street performers, violin players who think themselves superior, singers who look down on others, but no one stays for as long or travels as far a distance as the grinders. You've pushed your cart from Whitechapel to Chelsea, from the crowded docks to the edge of Hyde Park. You've watched fog roll in so thick it completely muffled the sound. You've performed through freezing rain, light drizzle, shouting and laughter. And you've never once stopped for silence, unless you made that choice. You fix the organ yourself. It's temperamental now. The air bellows are somewhat stiff, the cylinders scratched from constant use. But you know every squeak, every momentary pause. It's as much a part of your voice as your own breath. Sometimes you daydream of owning a finer one. A decorated cart with bright gold trim, a fresh set of tunes, perhaps even a trained parrot or a pair of monkeys with matching hats. But then again, there's something entirely right about the one you currently have. Honest, worn, beloved, just like you. You finish packing up just as the streetlights start to glow amber. Toby stretches, yawns, and climbs up onto your shoulder as if it's his rightful place. Tomorrow you'll perform again, maybe on a different street corner, maybe back where the baker's daughter always smiles when you play the waltz, maybe near the theatre line where people still hum your tune as they stand and wait. And whether they realise it or not, you'll be there, cranking out music like a physical memory itself. Because in a world that's always rushing, you help it pause, to notice, to simply feel, even if only for one sweet rotating moment. You arrive quite early, before the bread has fully finished rising and the wagons carrying beer rattle down the main road. Your work apron is already covered with white chalk powder and your fingers are ready for the familiar smooth movement of the slate under your touch. Today's workspace, a plain black sign no bigger than a small storage closet door, but to you, it's a stage. You're a chalkboard menu artist. Your role is part beautiful handwriting, part persuasion, and part subtle magic. Because in the crowded streets of London, signs are screaming for attention from every direction. Painted, carved, nailed to doorways, suspended from chains. And your goal is to make a person stop and think, oh, that sounds delicious. The menu shifts daily and your chalk must keep up with it. Some days it's simple beef stew. Other days it's detailed smoked herring on top of bread with eggs boiled to perfection. Your employer, a skinny man with too many opinions and exactly one viewing glass, likes to dictate the exact phrasing while pacing back and forth, using suggestions like hearty but appealing and not too academic. You nod your head, then proceed to ignore him because you've developed a specific style, a a certain curve to the letters, a technique to make treacle tart look like a forbidden secret. You curve the large letter B in sausage and mash like the full stomach of a satisfied gentleman. You underline selectively, you add subtle flourishes. A tiny pot giving off steam, a perfect slice of pie, a small fork seeming to dance in the corner. It's not simply drawing, it's a brief performance executed in white powder. The regular customers notice your work. The coal delivery man from 2 buildings away always comments on your drawings of soup. A passing barmaid once asked if you would agree to write her name outside her mother's shop in Hackney. "She won't allow me," she whispered. "She claims chalk is for boys, but your letters look like they're singing. Your fingers are never fully clean. Chalk dust sticks to your cuffs, your collar, your nose. You carry a wiping cloth constantly and a small metal tin containing your 3 favourite chalk pieces, 1 thick, 1 medium size, and 1 extremely thin for adding fine details. There's a constant battle between you and the inevitable rain. You mostly win by working quickly and using bold lines. But every now and then the drizzle starts just as you step back to admire your finished work. The letters run together, the fine points of the script begin to drip. Once you discovered a dog's paw print right across a carefully drawn image of a roast lamb. You nearly burst into tears, but you immediately redrew it. You always start over. Some establishments pay you better than others. One allows you to eat the daily dessert if you complete the work before noon. You've consumed more rich sponge cake and suet roll than most men twice your age. Another establishment pays only with tea, but the owner permits you to include your signature in the bottom corner. Just an R, but it holds significance. You've even started drawing small scenes in the corners, a cat eyeing the fish dish, a hand reaching for a large tankard. A pie, with steam rising to form the word hot in elegant script. Customers pay attention. They lean in closer. They smile. You're not just illustrating food, you're illustrating desire. And in a city full of distractions, that's a kind of power. By the afternoon, the chalkboard becomes more than just a simple advertisement. It's a shared talking point for the local area. People start referring to the menu items by how you depicted them. "I'll have the one with the gravy waterfall," someone says, pointing to your drawing of the shepherd's pie. "The dessert that looks like a fortress," says a small boy in short pants, grinning at your cake sketch with battlements and a cherry on top. You once transformed a simple bowl of hot cereal into a masterpiece. A sun rising from a creamy ocean, rays curling in decorative steam. The oatmeal itself was still ordinary, but they completely sold out before noon. Sometimes the pub owner tries to be creative. "Write something in French," he urges. One morning, throwing down a recipe scribbled on the back of a large accounting book, you pause for a moment. You only have space for 22 letters. You decide on hot beef, whatever's available. The customers laugh heartily. They order in massive numbers. Your unique style starts to spread to other locations. A competing pub across the square employs their nephew to attempt to copy your style. You smile slightly when you walk past his sign. Uneven lettering, decorative elements that resemble clumsy scratches. It's flattering in a strange way. You start incorporating subtle personal marks in your own designs. A distinct loop here, a feathered period there. But it's not just pubs requesting your work anymore. You now receive requests from small pastry shops, tea houses, even a bookstall that wants you to draw a chalkboard of the week's most satisfying novels. You write Oliver Twist pears well with wheat gruel and draw a bowl with a spoon that looks completely unimpressed. You've started carrying extra small chalkboards, just in case someone needs a quick sign for a brief sale or a written apology for being out of a specific dessert. You once wrote, "Sorry, the pudding ran away." It caused 2 passers-by to laugh so loudly they walked inside and bought baked goods they didn't even want. But there's a secret to your success that no one knows. You listen carefully. You arrive before the rush, blend into the morning crowds and pay attention to the gossip, the complaints, the deep cravings. You figure out what people are truly hungry for long before they even glance at a menu. Not just food, but comfort, a little amusement, a reason to smile despite the coal dust and the daily pressures, and then you give it to them, one letter at a time. Sometimes, as you put your chalk pieces back into their tin and wipe your dusty fingertips on your apron, you wonder if this job has a future. What will happen when someone invents signs that can't be erased by water? Ink, perhaps? Or painted boards that never change, that stay identical every single day? How terribly dull that would be. Because your signs aren't just simple information. They're fleeting moments, small tokens that disappear by the evening and are recreated fresh each new dawn. You're part artist, part messenger, part brief poet of the day's appetites. And as you walk home, passing couples still joking about your little doodle of a goose, you realise something important. No one remembers the commercially printed menus, but they'll remember the one with the gravy waterfall and the dessert that resembled a fortress and the pie that seemed to wink at them on their walk to work. You've barely finished setting up the curtain with the stripes when the first pair of dirt-covered boots appears directly in front of you. A young boy, approximately 6 years old, holds a sticky confection in one hand and a piece of bread crust in the other. He doesn't even blink. He knows exactly the best place to stand. Front and centre, first row. You give the curtain one final adjustment and clear your throat loudly. It's showtime. You're a Punch and Judy puppet master, a street performer, an expert at vocal manipulation, a master of comedic mayhem. Your performance space is a brightly painted wooden box, barely wider than a barrel, lifted onto a stage with squeaky hinges and hidden compartments. It looks like a brightly coloured playhouse from the front. From the back, it's your confined, sweaty domain of tangled strings, squeaking devices and unexpected bursts of laughter. That's precisely how it must be done. Your hand quickly pushes up Mr. Punch, grinning wickedly in his red costume and pointy cap. The gathering crowd cheers loudly. A baby starts to cry loudly. Someone throws a halfpenny coin. The show begins. Punch and Judy isn't a gentle bedtime story. It's pure chaos. It's a cultural institution. It's the type of entertainment that Victorian parents pretend to disapprove of while laughing quietly behind their gloved hands. You duck behind the curtain and settle into position. One hand controls the puppet, the other frantically searches for necessary props. Your voice jumps suddenly in pitch, switching between high-pitched manic giggles and deep, guttural growls. Judy makes her entrance, flapping her arms dramatically. Punch hits the sausage. Judy scolds him harshly. Punch lets out a cackle. The baby puppet is dropped carelessly. The crocodile puppet enters the scene. The audience erupts in noise. Children scream with sheer delight. The adults shake their heads and try not to crack a smile. The baker's assistant lets out a loud holler. Someone way in the back is repeating every single line a full beat behind, like an awkward hiccuping echo. You've performed this show 100 different times, yet it's never the same. The people watching literally determine the story's direction. If they cheer the policeman, he comes out the winner. If they jeer, he gets a serious beating with the stick. One time, a gentleman who'd had too much to drink insisted Punch should face legal proceedings, and you created a courtroom scene on the fly that went on for 15 minutes, culminating with the judge being squashed flat by a chain of frankfurters. You don't just put on the story, you wrestle with it. The strain of using all those voices takes a toll. You rely on a swazzle, a tiny device made of metal and reeds secured in the roof of your mouth, to produce Punch's famous high-pitched shriek. It tickles your throat, makes your jaw hurt, and has caused you to sneeze violently right in the middle of a line more than once. But that sound, that sharp laugh, it's amazing. It's older than gas streetlights, older than the first cheap newspaper. It's the very sound of chaos itself. bouncing through narrow alleys and settling into the minds of children who truly only want to witness someone getting hit with a stick and have a good laugh about it. Mr. Punch isn't some hero. He's a real troublemaker. But in a life filled with regulations, schedules, and constant advice about sitting straight, there's a deep pleasure in a little puppet who throws sausages at figures of authority. You learned this entire craft from an old man named Felix, who used to set up his stage by the docks. He told you timing, son. That's the key. Timing and keeping your sausages under control. You weren't certain if he was joking, but you've repeated those words to yourself before every single performance since then. The audience's rhythm becomes your perfect beat. You listen closely for the little giggles, the sudden intakes of breath, the slightly delayed applause from the youngest kids. At the very end, your puppets dance to that specific music. Punch's strangely shaped nose nods up and down in sync with the laughter. Judy's hand connects just at the right moment. The crocodile always gets a second curtain call if the children shout loud enough for it. Back behind the safety of the curtain, you're utterly drenched, sweating right through your clothes. Your shoulders are throbbing. The swazzle has made your gums quite sore. But your hands keep moving with a kind of second nature, like a musician who no longer has to think about the instrument. It's total mayhem, but with a precise plan. And while it may look like absolute nonsense to any random person passing by, you know exactly what your objective is. You're controlling the emotional intensity of the scene. You're the one guiding the feeling. You're narrating a drama with processed meat, a screechy noise, and a puppet that looks like a crazy turnip wearing a fool's costume. The greatest reward? For a glorious 10 minutes, everyone completely forgets their troubles. A housemaid forgets the mountain of laundry waiting to be washed. A chimney cleaner stops coughing long enough to genuinely laugh. A little girl in used boots with holes in the toes squeals with pure joy, like royalty. And even the serious-looking men from the accounting firm crack a small smile just before they hurry off, pretending they never stopped at all. And you, totally unseen behind the cloth, hear every single bit of it. Sometimes you sneak in your own personal little jokes, Mr. Punch making fun of the Prime Minister, or Judy announcing she's leaving to become a rocket scientist. The grown-ups catch those ones. They quietly snicker to themselves. They drop a copper coin into your donation tin, not for the performance itself, but for the inside joke hiding just beneath the surface. On good days, you earn enough money to cover dinner, a draft beer, and a piece of hard cheese to share with the neighbourhood cat who guards your puppet box all night. On truly great days, someone hires you for a birthday gathering or a summer garden event. You bring the entire collection: Punch, Judy, the baby crocodile, the policeman, the hangman, even the ghost. Yes, there's a ghost now. You created him for Halloween and couldn't bear to retire him. Your puppets are stitched up, frayed, and are missing a button or two, but each one has a distinct sound you developed, a specific movement that's entirely their own. They live inside a wooden chest that smells strongly of cedar, dust, and perspiration. When you lift the lid, it's like unsealing an old children's book that's been shouted out loud instead of quietly read. You've stopped keeping track of the total number of shows you've done, but you can always recall the memorable ones. The day the boy with the injured eye sat right up front and laughed louder than anyone else. The day the elderly woman on crutches said, "I haven't heard that sound since my own brothers were kids." The day someone called you a genuine artist. You're not sure you fully believe them, but then again, not everyone possesses the ability to transform a simple wooden box, a scrap of fabric, and a silly squeak into something that causes total strangers to genuinely laugh together even when it's raining. And tomorrow you'll start the whole process over again, because in a city filled with smoke and sadness, Mr. Punch always gets the last laugh. Grown-ups shift their gaze and stifle little smiles. The baker's boy lets out a screech of mirth. Someone near the back repeats every phrase a fraction too late, like stumbling thunder with the hiccups. You have done this routine countless times, but it is never quite the same. The spectators shape the story. When they applaud the officer, he succeeds. When they mock him, he receives a whack with the staff. One time, a tipsy barrister insisted Punch undergo a trial, and you improvised a legal farce that stretched for 15 minutes and ended with the judge being flattened by a string of sausages. You do not just recite the story, you wrestle with it. The character voices extract a toll. You utilise a swazzle, a small metal and reed apparatus positioned against your upper mouth to produce Punch's trademark scream. It chafes your throat, strains your jaw, and has provoked fierce fits of sneezing in the middle of the show on several occasions. But, oh, that noise, that frantic squawk, it predates gas illumination, predates the cheap tabloids. It is the very voice of chaos, echoing through slender streets and into the spirits of children who simply desire to see someone struck with a cane and find it hysterical. Mr. Punch is not a hero. He is trouble embodied. Yet in a life submerged in regulations, clocks, and lectures on correct conduct, there is something profoundly satisfying about a puppet who launches sausages at people in authority. You acquired the technique from a man named Felix who performed close to the wharves. He told you, pace boy, everything depends on pace and sausage handling. You could not ascertain if he was serious, but you have repeated those words before every show since. The audience's heartbeat becomes your tempo setter. You listen for the small laughs, the sudden gasps, the lagging applause from tiny children in the rear. Your puppets dance to that auditory backdrop. Punch's crooked nose bounces in rhythm with the amusement. Judy's hit lands not a second too soon. The alligator consistently receives a comeback if the youngsters shout with adequate energy. Behind the cloth you are sweltering, soaked through your shirt collar. Your bones ache, the swazzle has worn your mouth lining raw, yet your actions flow with a kind of second nature, like a violinist who has ceased contemplating the instrument. It is disarray with an underlying design. And although it might appear like nonsense to a casual observer, you comprehend exactly what you are achieving. You are governing the speed. You are directing emotion. You are recounting a story with spiced meat, a high-pitched voice, and a doll that resembles a mad root vegetable dressed like a fool. The greatest part. For 10 continuous minutes, everybody forgets themselves. A cleaner disregards the heap of sheets awaiting washing. A chimney sweeper stops coughing long enough to let out a brief laugh. A little girl in inherited footwear with holes in the soles shrieks like a princess. And even the stern-looking men from the accounting establishment crack a slight smile before rushing away, behaving as if they never stopped. And you, hidden by the screen, take it all in. Occasionally, you inject your personal commentary, Mr. Punch making fun of the Prime Minister, or Judy declaring she is leaving to study science. The adults pick up on those hints. They chuckle softly. They deposit a coin in your container, not for the entertainment, but for the subtle jest within it. On good earning days, you amass sufficient funds for dinner, a beer, and a piece of cheese to share with the stray feline who guards your puppet container overnight. On truly exceptional days, someone hires you for a birthday gathering or a park event, and you bring the entire company. Punch, Judy, infant, crocodile, officer, hangman, even the phantom. Yes, there is a ghost now. You introduced him last October and could not bring yourself to retire him. Your puppets are repaired, faded and missing buttons, but each possesses a distinct voice, a movement that belongs only to them, you developed. They reside in a box that smells of cedarwood, cosmetic powder and perspiration. When you lift the lid, it's like opening a book that has been screamed instead of read. You have stopped keeping track of how many shows you have done, but you remember the important ones. The afternoon the child with the patched eye claimed the front position and laughed louder than anyone. The afternoon the old woman on walking aids said, "Have not heard that sound since my siblings were alive." The afternoon someone referred to you as an artist. You are unsure if you embrace the title, but then again, not everybody can transform a wooden container, some cloth and a squeak into something that causes strangers to laugh together in damp weather. And tomorrow you will do it all over, because in a town of soot and sorrow, Mr. Punch still gets the ultimate laugh. You manoeuvre the cart carefully across the uneven street, wheels protesting as it jolts over every crack. The wooden sides quiver a little, and inside, beneath the sheet and rope, your treasure awaits, a heavy, boxy contraption of black wood, copper and glass, your mobile companion, your livelihood, your nourishment. You are a street photographer with a travelling darkroom, not the sophisticated type with a building and heavy drapery, not the portraitist who captures wealthy ladies in lace next to indoor plants. You are the kind who chases the light, sets up at crossroads, in public squares, outside factories when the midday bell rings, offering immediate keepsakes for a couple of loose coins. You find your spot close to the railway station, where lovers say goodbye, soldiers depart, and every third person appears to need a face worth remembering. You extend your wooden support, wipe the glass with your shirt cuff, and pause. It takes hardly any time. Can you take a picture of two people? The young woman asking barely looks at you, her gloved hand tightly linked with the gentleman beside her. They stand still and apprehensive, the kind of posture reserved for both pictures and funerals. You nod, you gesture toward the painted background attached behind your setup, a faded drape depicting a formal garden somewhat bleached from sun and time. They gaze at it as though it might give them distinction or peace. You guide them into place, hands joined, faces forward, eyes lifted slightly. You have found the key to a good resemblance is not in the equipment, it is in seizing the moment just briefly enough for the story to be captured. You raise the dark cloth and duck beneath it, adjusting the lens, checking the brightness. The sun emerges just adequately through the cloudy sky. You insert the plate, hold your breath. Snap. Movement becomes memory. The development is not instant, not quite. You request they wait as you retreat into the back of your cart, your enclosed sanctuary. It is hardly large enough to crouch in, and it smells of chemicals, damp timber and time compressed. In the reddish glow of your safe light, you measure precisely. Developer, fixer, rinse. The shallow container ripples. A face appears. Two, actually, soft and a little surprised, as if they had not expected it to work. You have done it once more. You have preserved something real. You emerge with the finished image, still wet and smelling of sharp compounds. They breathe softly, smile, and put several coins into your hand. She tucks the picture into her handbag as though it is sacred. By now, a small line has formed. A young boy, dirty knees and all, holding a worn coin. An older woman with a starched hat and an expectant look. A pair of sailors, loud and swearing, who promise they will be perfectly still if you make us look like we are not idiots. You smile. You know better than to promise that each face tells a story and each picture turns into a keepsake someone did not realize they required until they watched it surface from your tray, like a memory escaping. You are not merely a photographer, you are a curator of souls, and this box of gears and glass, it is your trap. As the afternoon progresses, your fingers become darker, brown from the developing solution, red from the fixing agents, the grooves of your fingernails permanently tinted with the silent proof of your trade. You have tried protective coverings, but they restrict your movements. It is better to feel the slip of the plate, the edge of paper borders, the smooth wetness of damp glass as the image appears like breath held for too long. You have mastered the small tricks. A drop of oil to introduce warmth to pale features. A quick application of chalk to emphasize a neckline in the shadows. A breath upon the lens right before the shutter releases for that soft, misty quality the ladies appreciate. Not every patron desires beauty. Some desire reality, or at least their version of it. The factory manager insists on displaying his pocket watch chain so it is visible in the picture. Must look respectable, he mutters. The laundress asks you to cover the scar on her cheek. It is not my identity anymore. And a sailor once begged you to make him taller. You positioned a wooden crate under his feet and said nothing. You are not simply recording appearances, you are upholding intention. Some approach you privately. A young woman shaking in her cloak requests a portrait, but no inscription, no signature, no additional copy. You nod, you take her image, and you never inquire why. The look in her eyes communicated sufficient information. Children, however, present the biggest challenge. Always fidgeting, closing eyes, moving at the last moment. You have created diversions. Ask them to keep a marble steady in their hand, or to envision the camera is a mythical creature and they must face it. The results are often imperfect but full of spirit, and sometimes there are people who just stand before you and beam. No staging, no requests, just their true selves. Those pictures remain in your mind the longest. You maintain a separate container beneath your cart. Inside, wrapped in fabric, are plates you never handed over. Forgotten clients, unclaimed moments. A picture of a soldier who never came back. A woman who posed with a letter in her grasp, its seal intact. A boy with a dog that looked straight into the lens as though it understood everything. You call them your silent observers. On wet afternoons when no one arrives, you occupy the dark space, inspect the container and recall not their names, those vanished long ago, but the significance of their faces. The way they looked at you, not as a tradesman, but as someone who could halt time just for them. You have never owned a picture of your own self. It seems inappropriate somehow, as though being observed too clearly would break the spell. Because here, behind the equipment, you are simultaneously unseen and all-seeing. You are the eye that observes, the hand that composes, the quiet architect of memory. And when your final plate is fixed and the last picture dries under the cart, you collect your support, fasten the canvas, and proceed down the road, past the bakers, the lamplighters, the shouting newspaper boys, with your silent observers following you in the city and forward, awaiting preservation. The room smells of tea, blossoms, stiffening agent, and something faintly citrus. Lemon polish, probably, rubbed into animal bone. You occupy a polished surface under a tall window where light descends precisely, angled across delicate silk paper. Your fingers are already stained, your wrist steady. Before you rests a collapsed fan of light silk stretched over fine red ribs of bone. It is blank, waiting. You are a fan painter, and this fan is your canvas. Not a canvas in the typical sense. There is no possibility of error here. One slip of the tool and the whole piece is ruined. The silk spreads if you press too hard, resists if you proceed too lightly. Every stroke must be perfect the first time. The fan's owner is a woman of considerable means, of course. Nobody else ordered such things. She arrived with a swatch of her formal attire and a vague instruction, something romantic, but not overly passionate. You understood exactly what she meant. You sketched faintly in black chalk, basic shapes, a moonlit park, a couple of sweethearts neither too bold nor too retiring. You have done this scene before, but each version is new. A changed slant of the face, a more unrestrained bloom, a bird in the background, or absent. The paint is mixed with exactness, colouring and gum, a trace of egg white for shine. Your tool is camel hair, thin as a sewing needle. You paint in movements smaller than a murmur. There is music in the vicinity, a piano quartet hushed from the dining area below. It makes the touch smoother. It quiets the recollection of your first error years ago. A cherry blossom drawn too large, too intense. The customer declined payment. You burned the fan in a drainage channel. You do not make errors now. Occasionally, while you paint, you envision where this fan will go. Into a gloved grip at a garden party, ball, lifted playfully during a waltz, dropped intentionally at the feet of some gentleman who smells of tobacco and longing. Will he pick it up? Will she allow him? You have painted fans that ended engagements, others that began courtships. One was returned in pieces after a quarrel. Another ended up in the royal collection, though no one acknowledged your identity. Fan painters do not sign their work, not officially. But you possess your indicators, a miniature insect near the perimeter of the secondary rib, a twist in the decoration that shouldn't exist, your concealed inscription, your modest defiance. As the afternoon elapses, you interrupt only to extend your digits. The darkness extends. The satin yields under your implement. The admirers materialize. The blossoms flourish. You don't decorate what's actual. You decorate what ought to exist. You decorate yearning, separation, the instant preceding a caress. And though you'll never grasp this fan subsequently, your touches will be recalled in every motion of the wrist that reveals it, every wave that attracts attention. By dusk, the decoration is almost complete. You incorporate the concluding particulars in quietness, a subtle silver application to the vapour, the sparkle of lunar light on a water feature, a darkness that suggests enigma but discloses nothing. The fan is fragile, but the narrative it conveys is calculated. Adequate suggestion to kindle imagination, insufficient to provoke speculation. That equilibrium is your genuine expertise. You've decorated fans for mourners, young ladies, companions, nobility, everyone. Varying countenances, identical requirements. They desire beauty, certainly, but additionally authority. A fan in the appropriate grasp is a dialect, a barrier, or instrument. You've absorbed the signals, whispered between attendants. A fan contact to the face signifies agreement. To the jaw signifies refusal. Revealed extensively, its attraction. Partially shut, its peril. Released signifies pursue me. You never acquired these signals from literature. You acquired by observing at the rear of formal halls. You positioned behind a relative who married advantageously, grasping her wrap, her beverage, her quietness. And you witnessed what fans accomplished when words couldn't be uttered. That's why you commenced decorating them, not as embellishments, but as instruments. The fan you complete today is among your finest. The creases capture the illumination perfectly. Each rib a segment of a lunar-lit garden, each revelation a renewed breath of fantasy. You suspend it to the window and observe how it trembles. It performs, and it anticipates. You secure it cautiously in a cushioned container, transport it personally, because fans, like confidences, should never be entrusted to couriers. The customer receives you in a dressing garment and jewellery, scarcely examining the container. But when she raises the fan, reveals it once, twice, and grins at her image in the looking-glass, then you recognise she's perceived it. The gentleness of her endorsement is the sole praise you'll ever receive, but it's adequate. You proceed homeward with unoccupied hands, but marked fingertips. The fragrance of gum arabic adheres to your garments. You traverse gas illuminations, detect piano melody spilling from openings, and somewhere distant, an explosion of amusement from a gathering you'll never join. And yet your creation is already present. A fan decorated by your touch will glide through that assembly. It will wave near a waistcoat. It will shut with a crack acute enough to quiet a whisper. It will descend deliberately. At the precise instant, two gazes converge. Nobody will utter your identity. But in that brief instant interruption between observation and motion, your narrative will emerge. Because though the material may deteriorate and the pigment may fracture, the performance you orchestrated will animate again each time the fan is revealed. And that, in this metropolis of exteriors and refined realities, is a variety of permanence. You secure the panels to your frame like a mobile sandwich of timber declarations, one forward, one rearward. Decorated letters announce, try Mrs. Bletchley's remedy for anxiety, digestive troubles, and ethical confusion. The words sway somewhat as you proceed, transforming you into a mobile section, a human signpost with limbs. You're a human advertisement carrier, and your assignment is straightforward. Be visible, not audible, not questioned, just detected. You commence your morning outside Charing Cross, merging into the surge of footwear and commotion. You proceed gradually, never excessively rapid, ensuring every word of your placard has duration to embed itself into someone's unconscious before they vanish into a railway compartment or a coffee establishment line. It's not distinguished, but it provides a coin or two, and the regulations are on the placards. Remain vertical, maintain motion, avoid water pools, canines and youngsters who consider it amusing to rap on your rear panel. You execute your assignment in quietness, but your mind is distant from vacant. As you drift beyond butchers and tobacco merchants, you construct modest expressions in your thoughts. This manner precedes despair, with footwear deteriorated thin but characters prominent. A gentleman of communications, but never his personal. Nobody requests your perspective, merely the perspective of the panels you transport. This period, it's Mrs. Bletchley's remedy. Previous period, it was a bread shop. The period preceding, a legal professional offering discreet marital dissolution arrangements. No violence, no accusation. That particular one received several knowing glances and a pat on the shoulder. You don't recoil anymore when individuals recite your panel aloud, as though it's a curiosity. You're accustomed to the snickering, the ridiculing tones, the individuals who state he's presumably never even experienced anxiety or digestive troubles. You possess, you simply don't publicise it. There are familiar faces who encounter you on your path. One lady consistently provides a tranquil morning dear as though you're her somewhat unconventional nephew. A youth vends roasted nuts near the commons and provides you the ones that rupture prematurely. Your preferred, a gentleman with an umbrella who examines every single panel you don and never ridicules. He simply acknowledges seriously as though he comprehends. Occasionally, when the patron desires to be ingenious, you're provided accessories, a container of imitation medicine containers to transport in one grasp, a duo of sandwich panels suspended from the flank. Once a plumed headpiece with a placard that stated, "Don't observe my headpiece, observe my rear." You donned it, you detested it, you received compensation. The occupation is cyclical. In precipitation, the panels distort. In gusts, they function as canvas. In warmth, they adhere to your rear like additional epidermis. You've possessed fasteners rupture, declarations peel. Even a canine relieved itself on your lower leg mid-advertisement. But still you materialise. You proceed, you publicise. Because as peculiar as it appears, there's something peculiarly respectable in being reliable, even if it's merely as an advertisement with footwear. And you've acquired something no placard can instruct. Individuals observe you, even if they feign otherwise. You discover your pace by midday. That's when the passages are most populated. Vendors yelling, equines clattering, establishment entrances oscillating open and closed with a cadence that seems almost like respiration. And you, positioned somewhere intermediate, oscillating somewhat under the burden of your communication. Mrs. Bletchley's remedy for a more refined digestion. Someone snickers. You maintain motion. The placard protests as you advance. You've acquired to attend to it, not merely for splinters or movements, but for cadence. Every advertisement possesses a noise, an oscillation, a tempo. You proceed to it. If you don't, the burden distributes incorrectly. The rear panel rebounds against your vertebrae. The front angles into your knees. You transform into portion of the framework. You previously felt humiliated by it, this mobile function as human emphasis. But following a duration, something transforms. You cease considering yourself as the communication. You commence considering yourself as the border. Ultimately, the cobbler placard doesn't covet the footwear, it merely elevates them. Some afternoons you exchange panels. Midway through, your employer provides you a fresh arrangement, Mother Pence's pigment, dark as your remorse. You chuckle. It's a superior laugh than yesterday's dental remedy retaliates. You secure it and advance toward the Strand, where additional gazes wander. Then a youngster poses the inquiry you receive at minimum once weekly. Do you ever examine your personal placards? You grin and acknowledge. Naturally, I transport them, don't I? She contemplates that, grimaces as though it's excessively evident to be intriguing, then bounds away. But it persists in your thoughts. Do you accept the placards? Have you ever acquired a remedy? Attended the pastry establishment? Transmitted a confidential dissolution correspondence to the gentleman in the crimson garment on Cork Street? Negative. And yet you've marketed them entirely. With your quietness, you commence to detect configurations. Which declarations earn coins deposited into your garment receptacle? Which ones trigger individuals to traverse the passage without regarding you? The most detrimental panels are the ones excessively ingenious by considerable measure. Nobody examines a jest in haste, the superior brief, prominent, unapologetic bread that doesn't contradict. That particular one rendered a butcher laugh so intensely he provided you an entire shilling. By twilight, the pigment commences to deteriorate around the perimeters. The fasteners excavate into your frame. You sense like a mobile gravestone. By the duration, you restore the panels to the repository shed beyond the printing establishment. You rotate your frame, extend your vertebrae. You're merely a gentleman again, no longer a phrase. And yet, as you proceed homeward, something persists. You examine the openings you traversed earlier, now radiating with gas illumination at the individuals consuming nourishment you publicized, examining papers you once donned, and you comprehend today in some modest manner. You moulded the passage, not as a speaker, not as a composer, but as the tranquil mobile interruption between the metropolis's phrases. And tomorrow you'll constitute another one. The workspace reeks of floral powder and deteriorated aspiration. You occupy by the opening in a diminished chair with a circle of cord encircled around your digits and a collection of fibres arranged in your grasp. The illumination is insufficient today, but your vision is accustomed to exertion. You don't require much to execute your occupation. You're a tassel creator, and your existence is one of coils, fastenings, and fibres that must never entangle. The chime above the establishment entrance hasn't resonated in intervals, but that's typical. Your profession doesn't demand attention. It's tranquil, decorative, covertly indispensable. Nobody notices fringe until it becomes essential. The moment you look for them, they appear in every corner. They hang from drawing room curtain pulls. They sway on key fobs and door handles. They are sewn onto the edges of pillows, coats, lampshades, and opera programme markers. They are even concealed within the folds of parasols, where the fine twisted loop gives a lady a secure, delicate hold. You craft each one by hand. It starts with the head, a solid core wrapped tight in thread until it is smooth and prominent. Then comes the skirt, where the threads are carefully brushed out like a tiny horse's mane. You cut, measure and bind. You fasten loops, add collars, and sometimes, if the patron is wealthy enough, you include beads. The process is steady, even soothing in its own way. Twist, pull, secure. You count in sequences of 4. You hum a quiet melody. You think about your work. Certain tassels are designed to complement a larger item, perhaps a footstool or a long coat. Your workspace smells of velvet remnants, thread and silk. The instruction is to make it sing but not scream. You understand the subtlety required. Once a gentleman requested a tassel for the tip of his walking stick. He said it was for panache, twirling his moustache as he spoke. You created one for him in green and gold, knotted in a spiral that reminded you of champagne bubbles rising. He bowed, lifted his hat and strode out looking like he had just received a royal title. Your direct customers are rarely the final users. They are usually interior designers, house managers, boutique owners with exacting tastes, a few hat makers and one particularly quiet harpist who insists on custom fringe for her tuning wrench. You work in stillness while the city rushes on outside. Sometimes you listen to the rhythmic click of horseshoes on the stones and imagine the journeys your tassels take, hanging from luxury carriages, swinging in formal sitting rooms where confidential matters are whispered under crystal light or tucked away in drawers beside vials of perfume and unposted letters. Once you recognized one of your creations dangling from the back of a duchess's chair in a newspaper sketch of a garden party. You clipped the image and kept it hidden for weeks before it was ruined by ink and thrown out. The shop's front window holds a simple display, a single red tassel with a brass cap posed as if frozen mid-swing. Most people walk right past. A few glance in, but the majority do not notice. But the ones who come inside, they know precisely what they are seeking. They have arrived for a particular item, a specific flourish, the perfect finishing detail. Something that moves when the door opens, something that whispers a promise. This, too, was considered. You keep your cords in old tea tins, organised by thickness and sheen. Your golden shades rest near your deep reds, your navy blues and olives share a holding bin. The nuances of white, cream, pearl, bone and bridal shade are kept separated, for they will tangle if handled improperly. You have learned their personalities. Silk knots differently than the cotton. Rayon will fray if you breathe on it with excessive force. Linen can be obstinate. In the cool morning air, you smoothly guide each fibre into its specific spot, like coaching a cluster of mice to parade in a ring. Nothing is discarded in your workspace. Even the little snippets trimmed from the tassel skirts like a haircut are collected for minor fixes, children's art projects, or a sudden unexpected mouse toy for the small alley cat who views your ledge as her domain. Some days the requests are quite ordinary. 10 identical tiebacks for a residential home, curtain edging for a music instructor's reception room. But then the singular orders arrive, the kind that make the hours pass swiftly. A travelling troupe needs 20 tassels to match a ghost's garment. They requested you give them a certain menacing motion, and you achieved it. A client commissions a single tassel with an ivory globe and dark edging for a funeral. He provided no details. You chose not to ask. But when he reappeared weeks later to purchase a second, this one in a gentle dove grey, you understood that something momentous had shifted. Then there was the bride, who wanted tassels on her gloves so they might drift as I signal farewell. She paid with banknotes and a portion of almond cake wrapped in delicate mesh. You ate it slowly, all by yourself. You never imagined that creating tassels would become your central purpose. It began as a minor task back when you were stitching lower dress edges for a milliner, but your tassels vanished quicker than her hats. So you set up your own small surface, started creating your own loops, and established your own quiet trade. And now your fingers move based purely on physical memory. You can tie a thread top while engaged in a full dialogue, and you could interlace a cord while asleep. You have manufactured thousands, some elegant, some eccentric. One was shaped like a pineapple for a gentleman who insisted on an island flair. You did not ask why. Your identity is never attached to the final item, but you recognize your own work. You see it hanging behind shop counters, draped over theatrical curtains, or swinging from a velvet rope in front of a museum display where people lean in and completely ignore the dangling threads. But you notice it. You stroll past, feeling a quiet satisfaction, and think, that item is mine. It seems peculiar, perhaps, to dedicate yourself to making something that exists purely to hang, to decorate, to move softly. But in this unyielding, dusty city, where borders are sharp and language is often even sharper, your craft introduces a delicacy, a fluidity, a subtle suggestion of celebration, remembrance, or dignity. And as long as there are coverings that need pulling, entrances that open, or memories that need pulling from a garment's edge, someone will need a tassel, and that individual will eventually find their path to you. You are up and ready before the church bells strike 12. Your apron is secured, your box is in hand, and your tone is clear and ready. You are a printed score vendor, an itinerant seller of written melodies, harmonies, and dreams put to paper. Your items are neatly arranged. Pages of notation and words are secured at the edges and ordered by their suggested quickness. You carry three-quarter timepieces, sad compositions, worship tunes, and amusing pieces. Some meant for the private living room, some for the public bar, and some strictly for the inner spirit. The city moves noisily around you. Carts laden with coal jolt by, street callers yell and chimney workers whistle. But your personal announcement is softer. You advertise new songs from the theatre area, arrangements for keyboard and singing parts. You describe your offering as a singing call, a rhythm you have perfected to rise just above the general hubbub, but never so loud that it sounds desperate. No one trusts a desperate tune. You position yourself near the music shops that refuse to hire you but appreciate the free crowd you attract. Outside coffee houses, and close to educational institutions where girls in formal headwear carry sheet music tied with string, hoping for the chance to perform something their instructor did not select. Your customers are diverse. A middle-aged gentleman with wrist cuffs stained by oil buys a humorous duet to perform with his daughters. A nervous young woman requests something upbeat but still suitable. For an afternoon performance, you recommend her the Mill-Wheel Gallop, a polite, quick piece with just enough beat to gently lift the sides of a serious mouth. Every melody has its moment. You carry long-established favourites, The Lost Chimes, Gentleman Joe, Sailor's Return. But you also carry fresh compositions from authors you have never encountered, printed on coarser paper, still slightly warm from the machinery. They arrive folded and loose, and your goal is to market them as if they are certain to become the next major anthem. You have developed a knack for assessing people. Some seek sorrow, a slow piece in a minor key to match the feeling of their previous 7 days. Others want a laugh, a fast dance, a hint of musical stage fun. You take out each page like a card from a deck, matching their mood to a sequence of notes. The profit margins are small, and your income is even smaller. A fraction of a penny here, a smaller fraction there. You achieve more transactions when it is drizzling. It is an odd fact, but true. There is something about wet weather that makes people long for soft lamplight and a melody. You keep your sheets carefully wrapped in oiled cloth, secured beneath your arm or inside a worn canvas bag. When the breeze picks up, a single drop of liquid can spoil a whole page. You have lost melodies to the damp atmosphere before, and yet, when the daylight appears and you observe someone gently moving their foot to a tune they have not heard in years, it feels like pure wonder. You are not a melody writer, you are not a trained singer, but you assist the transition of songs into existence. And in this grey, working metropolis, that is an important function. By the middle of the afternoon, the pathways settle into their known rhythm, boots striking, babies crying, the soft, low sound of the lamplighters getting their equipment ready. You have moved into the quieter side passages now, where the houses are smaller but the windows remain open, and piano notes echo softly through the thin walls. You pause near one for just a moment and recognise the tune drifting out. The Soldier's Lament, a piece you sold 3 weeks prior to a girl with smudged ink on her fingers and a smear of dirt on her nose. She had hesitated over the cost, but purchased it anyway, gripping it tightly as if it represented something deeper than just symbols on paper. You offer a small smile. That is the motivation you continue. Every sheet you sell is more than just music. It is possibility, a chance for someone to convey an emotion they cannot put into spoken words. Joy, profound sadness, deep longing, all for just a few small coins. You place the power directly into their hands. You have witnessed its effect. The quiet boy who never spoke until he played music, the widow who asked for nothing but a slow piece for a single voice, the young servant who concealed her sheet music beneath her mattress, practicing late after everyone else was asleep. You have sold to formal churches and large singing groups, to bar pianists and Sunday school instructors. Once you even sold a piece to a street performer who incorporated a printed waltz into his act. He asserted it made the white birds fly on cue. You did not inquire how he accomplished it. Not every transaction is pleasant. A man once bought a love ballad only to rip it in half when he saw his previous partner across the street. You immediately offered him a tavern song instead. He chuckled, accepted the song, and offered you double the tip. Some clients only want the words scrawled onto a piece of newspaper or copied into small notebooks. Others cannot read the notation but ask you to sing one line so they can capture the mood. You agree when your vocal cords are not too strained. Your voice is imperfect, but it is genuine. And on the days when the light dims quickly and your legs feel heavy with tiredness, you still carry your bundle as if it were valuable material, because you never know when someone will request the exact correct song, the one they never even realized they needed. You walk past a bakery and the shop assistant inside waves at you. You sold her a fast, lively dance last winter, and she played it at her cousin's wedding. She later informed you it got the entire family moving, even her older relative, who had given up on happiness after his supply of potatoes failed. You wave back softly, feeling a sense of inner peace. At the end of the day, you count your money, worn smooth and darkened with use. You smooth out your remaining sheets, carefully straighten the corners that have been bent, and place the most hopeful piece on top, either spring again or the road home, depending on the way the night air feels. And as you walk back through the fading light streets, your bag lighter and your spirit surprisingly full, you hum one of the melodies aloud, soft and even, just loud enough to rebound off the brick structures because you are the city's quiet song seller, and in the gaps between the loud noise and the coal dust, you provide London with its tune. You pull your small cart along the service path behind a bakery where the glass containers are always warm from being close to the heat sources. You are a glass jar retriever, and while your work may sound ordinary, it is one of the most silently necessary services in your entire district. Your focus constantly surveys window ledges, store entryways, small back gardens, and bar surfaces. You are seeking the subtle sheen of empty jars, tiny ones with narrow openings that once held preserves, rectangular ones that were used for mustard or a condiment, taller vessels from drugstores or hairstyling places. You tap gently on the back entrances of businesses, offering a soft, well-practiced question. Any glass for me today, whole or damaged? I take both varieties. Most days, the answer is yes. In this era, glass is considered very important. It is capable of being recycled, cleaned, and sold again. But few people want the difficulty of reusing it themselves, and even fewer want to risk keeping broken jars that could shatter further if touched. That is your function. You collect, organise, purify, and remarket, operating like a hidden agent in the trade of common necessities. This morning you have already collected 3 pickle jars, 1 sugarloaf container, and a strange round-bottomed bottle from a tailor who said it once held something that should not be smelled. You respected his warning. Back at your living space, your small shed is a storage of glass. You have built shelving along all the surfaces and lined them with jars, sorted by their volume and transparency. Some are perfect, ideal for resale to sweet makers and food vendors. Others are chipped or misty, but you know a pharmacy owner who actually prefers that appearance. He claims it gives his medicinal liquids a sense of ancient authority. You are not against minor repairs either. You have learned how to smooth down a rough edge, dissolve difficult labels, and secure a cracked lid using wax or a rubber-like compound. You once even fixed a shattered jar using egg white and calcium, an old skill passed down from an elderly relative who once made ink in her fireplace. But you do not just sell them back to the shop owners, you also exchange with glass workers who melt the unusable rejects down and pay you based on their total heaviness. And occasionally a house helper or a baker's spouse will offer you half a loaf of bread or a pot of rendered fat in exchange for 3 matching jars. A fair trade, you always agree. You consider it one of your most satisfying moments when you saw a line of your rescued jars on the main window display of a reputable chemist's on a main thoroughfare, each one filled with dried lavender and labelled with elegant writing. You kept your silence, just stood outside for a long time, admiring your unacknowledged contribution to the city's intricate order. You are not pursuing fame. You are motivated by helpfulness. You are the quiet engine of reuse for a city that discards much more than it realizes. And at the end of the day, when your hands carry a faint odour of vinegar and candle wax, and you have exchanged 20 jars for 2 shillings, a pleasant comment and a savoury pie, you feel a unique sense of accomplishment, because in a world run by mechanisms and dust, you have found a way to make the smallest items matter once more. You walk past a row of brick houses where the food preparation windows are always cloudy in the cold, and you know exactly which families will set aside their glass for you without being asked. Some even give them a quick rinse, while others hand them over still covered with sticky syrup or hardened with mustard seeds. You accept them all. You are not particular. Closer to the harbour, you have a non-verbal agreement with a fish seller who saves his vinegar bottles and the small jars that once held pickled onions. You trade him for bundles of kindling, which are wood scraps you gather from the barrel maker's yard and separate by hand. You are a collector, but you are also a crucial connection. Your network of contacts spreads quietly across the city. The baker who needs jars for his gooseberry jam knows to send for you. The widow who creates fragrant hair products in her basement requests your smoothest jars with perfect seals. And there is an old man 2 blocks away who will only buy from you because you never give me one with a broken bottom. You have established a reputation now, and it is interesting how people begin to treat you like a permanent part of the scenery. Children wave when you walk by. One even drew your cart in white stick once. It was uneven, but it warmed you for the rest of the day. A grocer once offered you a glass of beer simply because you always look like you are deep in thought. But what you are usually thinking about is the glass. The way it bends, the way it catches the light, the most effective method for piling it so it does not chip. Whether a light green jar with a slender neck would be better suited for a flower vendor than for a baker. You think about the history these jars contain, the seasonings they have held, the meals they have helped create, the tiny hands that once stole jam from them late at night. And you consider how strange it is that something so breakable can often outlast most other items in this urban environment. Sometimes you find beauty in the damaged ones. A fracture that elegantly curves like climbing vine, a small air bubble trapped in the side like a frozen tear. You have kept a few special ones hidden away in a cabinet. One holds your buttons, one keeps your chalk dry, one, your absolute favourite, is filled with smooth riverstones from the nearby water source, each one worn dull by years of moving water. At night, when the street lamps flicker and you are back at your home, you arrange the day's discoveries on your work surface. You cleanse each jar's edge with an old cloth until it is spotless. You set aside the very sharp fragments to be melted down. You polish the finest pieces until they gleam, and as you wash your hands and survey your collection, plain, transparent, flawed, you recognize a profound truth. You are not simply gathering jars, you are gathering unspoken histories, not the stories people articulate, but the ones they abandon. Encased in the glass, within the grime, in the tiny indentations you can feel with your finger, and in the low vibration of your cart as it rolls down a brick street just after dusk. Perhaps, just perhaps, London listens in kind. You settle beneath a fabric awning, your knees pressed together, the scissors catching the light that filters through. You are a profile artist, and your hands are your sole essential tools. You require no ink, no charcoal, only dark paper, a pair of keenly honed scissors, and an intuition for the hidden outlines that define a person's nature. Your compact stall is placed at the edge of the pedestrian walkway, sometimes near the Grand Exhibition Hall, or occasionally outside the playhouse where couples stroll by in their finest attire, their faces glowing from wine or the evening air. They pause, captivated. Then they take a seat. "Just your profile, madam," you instruct gently, adjusting the wooden chair toward the most suitable light. The key is preventing them from feeling self-conscious. Self-assurance is the primary ingredient. Your confidence, not theirs. They hold still. You look once, then a second time. Then the blades commence their function. Snip, curve, cut. There is no pause for uncertainty, no initial sketches. You cut directly from what your gaze perceives to what your hand executes. One mistake and the paper must be discarded. But you rarely err anymore. You understand how to suggest a jawline with a slight downward dip, a tight coil of hair with a rapid wrist flick, the fold of a lady's hat, the breadth of a gentleman's necktie. Every deliberate cut communicates more than just outline. It captures identity. Within a minute or two, the profile is complete. The end result is a delicate black shape, sharply contrasted against the ivory mounting paper. You secure it, resulting in a side portrait that somehow communicates more of the individual than a large oil portrait ever could. They always gasp, "Oh, that truly is me." You offer them a second copy at a reduced cost. People frequently desire one for a loved one or for their mother. You've observed women tenderly holding the silhouette as if it were a precious keepsake. You have witnessed many men attempt to appear casual while sliding it into the pocket of their waistcoat. You speak little while you work. Words can interrupt the focus, but you listen intently. You hear the expressions of praise, the shared anxieties, the brief life histories they offer as you cut. One woman confided in you about a fiancé who was lost at sea. She inquired if you could recreate his image from only her memory. You made the attempt. She wept. You have cut profiles of children, fighting men, flower vendors, comedians, and once a small dog. Some people dismiss silhouettes as inexpensive pictures, but you know the truth. They are immediate family treasures. In the evenings, your fingertips are darkly stained from handling so much of the paper. You sit by the window of your small rented room, the flame of the candle flickering, and examine the collection of the day's production. Some pieces you created at a client's request, others you made from memory after someone interesting passed your booth. You refer to these as your ghost cuts, faces that caught your attention, shapes that lingered in your mind long after the person departed. You temporarily fasten the most striking ones to the wall, watching your private collection grow. A young chimney sweep with a crooked cap, a widow with a sharp nose, a girl laughing with hair like seaweed. They feel like companionship, though they never utter a sound. Sometimes a person returns several days later, clutching their silhouette as if it were solid proof that they exist. One man informed you he used it as part of his marriage proposal. A child framed hers for a school competition, and an elderly gentleman with a rigid collar once came back, holding his cutout like precious metal. "She has passed on," he whispered, "but I still possess this part of her." "Thank you." You simply inclined your head. There was nothing further to be said. You have never maintained a permanent establishment. Your workspace is anywhere the light falls favourably. Near fountains, under park structures, in borrowed corners. At public gatherings when rain begins, you put your blades away and seek refuge under awnings, quietly observing the umbrellas move like dark insects. Every so often a passerby openly scoffs. "What value is paper artwork?" they mutter. It is only a fleeting novelty. You offer no retort. You simply continue cutting, because you comprehend better than almost anyone else. Shadows can sometimes be more revealing than actual faces. There is a specific kind of power in a profile view. It obscures almost every feeling, yet it discloses just enough to matter. A resolute jaw, a sloped nose, a composed mouth. You have cultivated the ability to perceive people not by what they openly display, but by what they present when they believe they are not being watched. And is not that the very essence of the city itself? So much is hidden. So much is only suggested. You conclude your day with a final cut, your own profile. You have done it 100 times, and each one is unique. Some days the lines are delicate, others sharply defined. You mount it on the wall beside the others, not out of vanity, but as a reminder to yourself. Even those who choose to stay in the background deserve to be truly observed. The piece of shell feels cool against your thumb, rough with ridges and plain. But with your precise tools prepared and your focus steady, you commence the work of transformation. You are a cameo portrait engraver, and this thin piece of sea animal will soon become a cherished item for some woman. The material you work with is not just any ordinary shell. It is often the helmet shell or a type of banded shell, valued for its inherent layers of colour, light white over a reddish orange or cream over a deep grey. These colour layers are crucial because your distinctive art lies in carving into depth, where each deliberate incision removes a layer of darkness to expose the light beneath. You sit near a window to capture the best light, with a magnifying glass over one eye, the air around you faintly scented with vinegar and polish. It requires many hours to engrave a single cameo, and most of that time is spent bent over, completely still, taking breaths as gently as if your own lungs might fracture the shell. The customer, usually a woman of means, provides either a small sketch, a miniature painting, or merely a description of the individual. My girl just turned 16 years old. She has gentle eyes and always wears a braid over her left shoulder. Starting from those words, you begin. First the basic shape, then the graceful slope of the neck, the upward curve of the forehead, the subtle bend of the lips held in a pose of reserve. You carve upward, always lifting toward the point of maximum light, so the subject emerges from the shell like a faint spirit. In Victorian Britain, cameos are more than just jewellery. They symbolise remembrance, social standing and sorrow, all contained in a small space. A young bride might wear the cameo of her mother. A widow might request her late husband's profile to wear close to her heart. You have carved ancient Roman goddesses, idealised nameless beauties, and even Queen Victoria herself, though always from a copied image, never from a live sitting. The most affecting pieces, however, are the images of everyday existence. A midwife's deceased spouse, a child lost to a sudden illness, a father recalled in his youthful prime, and inevitably romantic partners, so many lovers. Each tiny curl of hair, each gentle slope of the nose, each fine lace collar is painstakingly etched in low relief. The whole object speaks not only of physical form, but of profound feeling. At the end of the day, you place your unfinished pieces in drawers lined with velvet, being exceptionally careful not to scratch the smooth surface. A single careless slip can ruin days of devoted work. You have heard of other carvers throwing finished cameos into the fire over one chipped eyelash or a slightly uneven cheek, but you have also seen women weep when they finally hold the completed piece in their hand. There is a precise moment, a silence when they rotate it gently in the light, seeing the face of someone cherished rising subtly from the shell, as if time itself had momentarily reversed. That moment is what you truly carve for. Of course, the simple instruments are never enough by themselves. You employ steel engraving tools, fine needles, and scrapers. But your true instruments are your enduring persistence, your capability for memory, and your quiet focus on light itself. A perfectly carved cameo does not just show a face, it appears to softly shine. You have accepted commissions from all walks of life. Once, a duchess brought you a small piece of silk ribbon and asked if you could duplicate the exact way her brother wore it in his military picture. Another time, a coal merchant's wife paid you in small monthly payments for a cameo of her child who had passed away young. You carved a single daisy into the background because, she explained, he always picked them for her. Your workshop is not grand. It is a small space, a worn wooden table, the fine shell dust gathering in a shallow dish. But here, in this humble place, beauty is gently brought forth from the heart of the ocean. You have heard stories of factories attempting to mass-produce cameos with machinery. They are spiritless imitations, every single one identical. But your customers always return eventually. The machine-made ones are too flat, they complain, too lacking in vitality, because what you provide is not merely a manufactured item, it is a piece of memory. Sometimes you find yourself quietly humming as you work, old religious hymns, street melodies from your younger years, or sometimes nothing at all. Just the sound of your breathing and the gentle scraping of the shell beneath the steel point. It is a contemplative process, restorative, almost therapeutic. You have never created a cameo of your own face. It feels too self-serving, too unsettling. But perhaps one day someone else will request it. A young assistant, perhaps, or a niece who remembers that your fingers always carried the faint smell of vinegar and dust. And if they do, if they carve your face with the same diligent attention to detail, you hope they include the subtle flaws, the slight angle of your mouth, the line where your spectacles rested, and the barest hint of genuine satisfaction in the corner of your lip. Because more than anything else, your cameos have always been truthful, softly, silently, and always in profile. The heat rises in shimmering waves off the cobblestone street as you push your small cart into its usual position. It is peak summer in the city, what the papers are calling a brutally hot day, and children are already running through the streets with sticky hands and red cheeks. You are a penny lick vendor, and today promises to be exceptionally busy. Your gear is simple and necessary. A large metal bucket filled with fresh, hand-cranked ice cream, a broad-handled serving spoon, and a collection of thick glass cups. They are weighted at the bottom and have a shallow hollow at the top. Just enough room for one or two quick tastes. It does not seem like much of a luxury, but for most people it is a small, sweet indulgence that instantly cools the tongue and brightens the entire afternoon. You call out your choices: vanilla, lemon, only 1 penny. Mothers tightly gripping their shopping bags pause. Young chimney sweeps drop their hats and rush toward you. A gentleman even raises his hat, offering you a coin for his daughter who's wearing lace gloves. You scoop the ice cream, place a spoonful into the glass and hand it over carefully. The child licks with great eagerness, and when they are finished, they return the cup and you wipe it swiftly with a wet cloth before offering it to the next person waiting in line. Yes, it is not the most sanitary of customs, but this is the 1880s, and no one questions the penny lick, except maybe the government health inspectors. They have recently started to complain about cleanliness. One published story falsely accused penny licks of spreading an infectious sickness. Another labelled them dangerous carriers of illness. You hear faint rumours of a coming prohibition, but for the moment the law remains on your side, and the length of your line proves that no one is overly concerned. You keep moving through the different areas, between the public parks, the noisy markets, and near the main bridges. In this extreme heat, the ice cream starts to melt quickly, but that, ironically, is good for business. Better hurry up, you advise the buyers. It will not last long in this heat. Children tug on their mother's sleeves, pleading for a turn. You sell 20 servings in quick succession before you even pause to take a full breath. As the sun reaches its highest point, your working rhythm speeds up. Scoop, wipe, repeat the motion. The glass becomes slick in your hands, and your cleaning cloth is completely drenched by noon. You sometimes replace it with a cleaner one tucked into your apron. But let us be truthful. By the end of the day, every penny lick cup has touched dozens of mouths. You do not dwell on the thought, and neither do your customers. For them, it is the simple pleasure that matters most. The sharp, unexpected coldness of the lemon, the slow, satisfying melting of the vanilla, the occasional rare hint of strawberry if they are lucky. Ice cream is not merely a sugary treat, it is a true marvel. It is cold, sweet, and exotically unfamiliar. Imagine tasting snow right in the middle of summer. Of course, you hear the circulating rumours that some sellers skip the washing process between servings, that they dangerously reuse batches which have already softened, that one single penny lick might be the final flavour you ever experience. You simply shake your head. It is just a minor amount of frozen dessert, not a deadly illness. Nevertheless, times are certainly changing. You have begun to notice cones covered in wrapping paper being offered by the Italian vendors. No shared vessel, no soaking towel, no standing in line to give back the cup. The well-to-do customers prefer them. They are more hygienic, more sophisticated. You are not entirely certain about this emerging trend. One part of you mocks the change. But another part understands inwardly that your time in this business is absolutely limited. The penny lick will soon be relegated to the past, but for this moment you still retain your devoted, recurring clients. The small child with the worn leather boots who always requests only the very edge of the cup. The matron who claims that the lemon flavour heals all her headaches. The young sweethearts who deliberately share a single taste and blush intensely each time they do it. You will continue to propel your wagon ahead for as long as the sun remains glowing brightly. And perhaps one day someone will recall you, not your specific identity, but the sensation of a crystal glass warmed by their own palm, and the beautiful fleeting taste of something cold and immediately gone from their tongue. Something surprisingly plain, something widely experienced, something that for the charge of a lone copper coin converted a chaotic, teeming city into a tiny, flawless moment of absolute wonder. And now, as the electric lights begin to grow faint across the cobblestone lanes of your mind, you sense the total load of the day settling like a fine dust on an old tapestry. You have travelled through the narrow passages of lamplight and elaborate lace, heard the distant, sharp sound of scissors and the soft, gentle sweep of a fine bristle on a folding screen. You have relished the tiniest portion of lemon ice from a shared container, turned delicate lockets over in the curve of your hand, and watched a perfect image take shape in jet-black paper, like a soft, airy whisper echoing from the deep history. Victorian Britain was a realm of more than just roaring locomotives and constant soot. It was a place of specialised, quiet occupations and unusual, precise hands, the unnoticed, the entirely forgotten individuals. People who carefully carved out their whole existence on shells and in the shadows. Individuals who rang small chimes, carried glass containers and untold histories, and sold sheet music on busy street intersections. You will not find them documented in the major historical records or honoured in immense stone statues, but tonight they have found a permanent home in your own recollection. So, take one last deep breath through that gaslit window. Listen for the soft, gentle scratch of chalk on a slate slab, the noise of a puppet show being neatly packed away for the evening, the light, feathery quietness of a brush cleaning a velvet stage curtain. It is all slowly disappearing now, like the final sustained notes from a tiny musical device. You feel cosy, you are protected, and your long imagined journey for now is finally finished.